The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. And the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Bloodborne released for the PlayStation 4 back in early 2015, around about the time I was interviewing for my first job in Japan. My divorce had been finalized about 2 years prior, and after taking a vacation to Dubai to hang out with my best friend, who was living there at the time, and spending a year working as a personal trainer at my gym, I finally decided to return to the road that had led me to go to university in the first place. My debts were mostly clear, and my life was my own again. But even so, at the time, it was hard to imagine that just having the guts to send out an email would lead to such monumental changes in my life. The PS4 had been around for a couple of years at this point, but I was then, as I am now, a PC gamer, and to be honest, I couldn't have cared less about Souls games at the time. I was aware from online discourse that this thing called Dark Souls existed, and it was notorious for being absurdly difficult, and making you die and restart many times over. I didn't know much else about it, I didn't really think I needed to. I just knew that I didn't want anything to do with that at all. I am, however, something of a sucker for what I refer to as trenchcoats and tricorns fantasy, and I must say that some of the promotional art for the game did catch my eye. But honestly, I seem to recall I was going through an indie game phase at the time, and with my life barreling down a track towards something completely new and exciting, things like the latest games and movies, that had been so important to me only a matter of months prior, were the furthest thing from my attention. It wouldn't be until the lead up of Elden Ring's release that I'd even considered trying a Souls game, and then I basically went from hating it, to refunding it, to arguing with my friends about it, to trying this one, thanks to a free key I acquired, to getting it, to loving it, to trying it again and liking it this time around. So since I was basically a FromSoft fan at this point, with Sekiro being one of my favourite games, I even did a video about it here, I was more aware of the situation with Bloodborne. There were, and still are for that matter, a lot of calls for a remaster of this one, which, I mean, on one hand, the game is only a generation old. It's not like it's Soul Reaver on the PS1. But on the other hand, it's over 10 years old, and 30 FPS is kind of an issue. So maybe some kind of updated port is in order, if not a full-scale remaster. It was sometime last year, when I was playing through Final Fantasy 7 and 8 for the channel, that I first started seeing articles with clickbaity headlines telling us that Bloodborne in 60 FPS was finally here. Now, I'm in no way plugged into the comings and goings of modern gaming these days. Yeeting my Twitter account was one of the best moves that I ever made for my mental health. And while I do have a blue sky, the feed is nothing but indie dev projects. Since I do this YouTube thing as a hobby and low-paying side hustle, all the things here, my gaming time and attention is very limited, so I tend to stay locked into my bubble until a project is finished, and I never check out any of the state of plays or other big streaming events that happen over the year. I just wait for the next day and search for new game trailers to see if anything catches my eye. Even for me though, the arrival of 60 FPS Bloodborne, something fans of Souls games have been crying out for years now, seemed a little too abrupt, and I figured this probably wasn't what people were hoping it was. And of course, I was right. The first comment on these posts would be something like, "Don't get too excited, it's just emulation." While I do protest at the concept of just emulation, because there's nothing just about the work that goes into getting a good emulator working, I understand the feeling of these commenters, especially if they don't actually have a PC with the power to run it. But the outlets could stand to be a little more honest with the titles of their articles. I guess that's just the attention economy we live in, huh? I filed this information away for another time though, and just got back on with what I was doing. Who knows? Maybe by the time I actually got around to trying it, a real port might have been announced.
You serious?
Here's hoping that joke ages badly. It was early in 2026, during my spring break, that I got one of my urges to get some jank working on my computer. I like going to the abandonware site and trying to get old forgotten games to run on my PC. There's actually quite a dedicated community of people out there doing fan patches to help get these oldies running again, though I've yet to get Evil Twin or The Devil Inside to run. It was after I'd managed to get The Return of the King running and was even dancing around the idea of doing a video about it for the channel that the whole PS4 emulator and Bloodborne popped into my head again, and I figured, why the hell not? Given my previous experience with emulators, I wasn't expecting much, so imagine my surprise when... Oh damn, guys. It's working. It just works. To be honest, the emulation does have its flaws, and the game can't be played online. That's not a problem for me personally though, as I've never cared much for those features in Fromsoftware games anyway. But yeah, here we are. Bloodborne on my PC, running at 60 FPS. I wonder if it's any good. Well, at the time of writing, I finished the base game and DLC twice, so that should hopefully give you some idea of my thoughts on it. And so, here I am now, writing a script about it, and maybe a few weeks from now, you'll be here too, watching the video about it. So why don't we dive into this rabbit hole and see if we can't crawl all the way down to the bottom. Lock your doors and windows, keep the fire hot and your weapons close, because the bad moon is rising over Yharnam, and it's time to hunt. This will likely be one of the shorter development sections that I'll have written over the last year or so. While Bloodborne's development no doubt had plenty of the regular ups and downs and trials and tribulations of game development, it was overall a pretty vanilla event. It didn't take place at the dawn of 3D gaming and see a massive transformation and expansion of the studio. It wasn't troubled by the loss of the creative leads and massive staff restructuring at the final hurdle. It wasn't a 6-year love letter to the studio's original catalogue, or a game that was hamstrung by publisher intervention. Its development wasn't even as interesting as the other Fromsoftware game being made at the same time as it for the existing hardware. At best or worst, there was one delay of about 2 months towards the end of the cycle. This small piece of drama involved the developers approaching Sony, explaining the situation to them, requesting an extension on their deadline, and Sony saying, "Yeah, sure." The author at the helm of this, one Mr. Hidetaki Miyazaki, does deserve something like a mini biography at some point. But honestly, I think that belongs in a Dark Souls video, and I am going to do one of those one day. So rather than repeat myself, I'll stick to the cliff notes for now, as the man probably needs very little in the way of an introduction. Miyazaki wasn't a kid who grew up with big dreams of making games. In his own words, he wasn't even allowed to play them until he reached the age of 18. After playing the game Ico, he fell in love with the idea of making games, and decided to try and find a job at a game company. He was hired by Fromsoftware, and first worked on Armored Core, and then Demon's Souls. That is so weird to say. Since I played through the entirety of Bloodborne on my PC, I really shouldn't say never in regards to my chances of ever playing this one. But I am a PC gamer, and I've no interest in buying a console just to play one or even a few exclusive games. So for now at least, this one is very much off the table for me. It's worth mentioning here though as, first, this was the game that jump-started Miyazaki's rise to stardom, and eventually saw him becoming the president of Fromsoftware. And second, because Bloodborne was, for a while at least, rumoured to be a sequel to it. While the DLC for the first Dark Souls game, Artorias of the Abyss, was wrapping up production, Japan Studio, whom Miyazaki is a fan of thanks to Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, approached them about making a new game, specifically for a new PlayStation. In an interview with Japanese outlet 4gamers.net, Miyazaki said,
"First of all, regarding why it's not Demon's Souls 2, the project started with the idea of, let's make something new on new hardware.
And later,
Yes. It was around the time we had finished production of Artorias the Abyss edition of Dark Souls, and I think it was before the PS4 was announced, but the fact that it was on new hardware was appealing, so we were very happy to do it.
Miyazaki had already decided to take a step back from making Dark Souls 2 so that other people in the company could have a chance to shine. He'd taken the helm for the Dark Souls 1 DLC and commented in an interview how great it felt to build upon his existing work. However, the prospect of making something for the PlayStation 4 and the appeal of an entirely new story and world set his imagination racing. I know you'll want a Demon's Souls 2 and Bloodborne 2. I get it, but every writer, artist and game dev has folders full of unfinished projects that were abandoned when a more exciting new idea popped into their heads. Just because big studios are contractually obligated to finish their games doesn't mean the people helming them don't have these issues. The power of the PS4 and the increased visual fidelity it promised really unleashed Miyazaki's creativity. There were certain settings and themes he'd been itching to explore for a while, but hardware limitations meant that, unless he wanted to make games exclusively for high-end PC owners, he wouldn't be able to do justice to the visual spectacle in his mind. As the game's producer Masaki Yamagiwa said in an interview with PlayStation Lifestyle at the 2014 Tokyo Game Show,
"We always wanted to make a game set in the Victorian era, but making it look good, with all the clothing and the architecture and things, required a console more powerful than the ones that were around. The arrival of the PS4 finally gave us that. Bloodborne isn't a game that could have been cross-generation, it was only possible on the PS4.
It's not that Miyazaki has a passion for European history, but he's very inspired by architecture and environmental storytelling. The places you traverse in these games aren't just levels that serve to challenge and entertain you as you go from point A to point B. They are lived-in world spaces with complicated histories and terrible secrets hidden within them. For Bloodborne's setting, Miyazaki drew inspiration from the likes of Bram Stoker's Dracula. He describes the game's setting of Yharnam thus:
I hope people will first feel the atmosphere is similar to Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yharnam is an old city on the outskirts, a city that is an old medical center, but an endemic disease called Beast Scourge is spreading. That kind of feeling.
Because of the various ways that different elements of game design weave into each other, the direction things were going with both the story, the setting, and the new technology meant that for the gameplay, it wasn't going to be as simple as just doing what they had done with Dark Souls all over again, but somewhat tightened up. For Bloodborne, the protagonist was going to be a hunter, the thing that the creatures hiding under the children's beds have nightmares about. This role required a more aggressive style of combat, with more forward momentum. While the hunter was certainly going to be vulnerable and was absolutely going to die a lot, it didn't make sense for them to always be on their back foot and carefully picking their moments. As Miyazaki says here,
in Demon's Souls, we had this rather passive battle base in mind, but in this game, we wanted to transform it into something more proactive, something that would allow players to overcome the situation in some way.
So you wouldn't be waiting for your moment, you'd be creating it. Along with this, the Victorian era setting meant that early stage firearms would also be available, and the team had to think about how they were going to work those into the game, and how they were going to adjust the enemies to account for it. This raised the question of the game's difficulty. The Souls games were already pretty notorious for their challenge, which is something Yamagiwa-san thinks is a little unfair. As he says here,
"Sometimes we're worried that our games are publicized as difficult games to play, that they're for hardcore gamers only, but the team's intention is not that. They're not creating games just for hardcore gamers. We want to make sure that our message gets across that when you play the game, it doesn't require super reflexes or super finger movements. As long as you study the situation and learn the AIs, you can overcome the enemies."
Raising the difficulty ceiling was never part of the design. They felt that where they were with Dark Souls was just fine, and wanted to keep it there. With all that in mind, Miyazaki's team got to work building the world and the mechanics, upgrading the company's proprietary engine to create stunning new visuals for the PlayStation 4, and weaving this new vision together into a dark and bloody story of conspiracies, murder, monsters, and cosmic entities from beyond the very boundaries of reality. The story for this one was going to be far more layered and intricate than any of the mysteries presented in the likes of Anor Londo, and once the secrets of this place were uncovered, a person just might want to wish all that knowledge out of their head again, lest it drive them to a lifetime of nightmare-filled sleep and utter madness at the end of it all. When Miyazaki was young, his parents were both office workers who didn't have a lot of money to buy books for him, or time to teach him to read above his current level. He said in a couple of interviews now that he often plundered the local library for worlds to explore and adventures to go on. This led to him needing to borrow books that were above his reading level. As he says himself,
Growing up, as a kid, I loved to read. I liked to read books that were above my range. I always tried to aim higher and read more difficult books. What would happen is, although I could read them, sometimes, because I was so young, I couldn't read too deep into them. Maybe I would understand half of the story. What would happen is that my imagination would help fill the other half, and that imagination element would just blow up. That's the part I enjoyed. Filling in the gaps of where I didn't understand the readings, where my imagination took me to eventually think that I understood what I was reading.
And when you think about it, this is how Miyazaki presents his stories to us as well. While we may find some plot threads easy to follow, or think we're heading down the correct path to achieve something, we often, very quickly, run smack into an incomprehensible symbol that we'll have no way of understanding until we've had time to grow and learn more things about the world. And even when it's all over, and we've gone on a personal quest to piece it all together, we'll find gaping holes in the story that we need to fill in with our imaginations. All of this can make talking about the stories in these games pretty challenging. A person could, realistically, play through an entire Souls game without having the slightest idea what's going on, and be just fine with that. Dark Souls 1 actually gives you a fairly basic setup by telling you that the Age of Fire is ending, and implies that there might be something you can do to prevent that from happening. It even confirms this when you reach Londor and Guinevere tells you that you're a kind of chosen one, destined to link the first fire and rebirth the world in its glory. Though that may not be entirely true. With Bloodborne though, you don't even get that. At best you get,
don't think too hard about all of this. Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good.
and that's it. The stories are layered and winding. We're dropped into them at the end without any context, and it's assumed your character already knows what's up. So nobody brings the game to a crashing halt for a moment of fourth wall breaking exposition. Finding out what's really going on takes patience and a curious soul, willing to carefully peel back all the various layers of mystery and sort all the disparate pieces into some kind of coherent narrative. It's kind of like in House of Leaves how the protagonist finds a chest full of notes written on everything from a store-bought notebook to the back of a napkin, realizes there's actually some kind of story hidden in this giant mess, and spends months of his life piecing it all together while slowly going through an entire mental breakdown in the margins and footnotes of the book. Someone should probably check in with all those Dark Souls wiki guys now that I'm thinking about it. So we'll tackle this story the way it's presented to us, as a journey. First, we'll look at the setup and how things seem to be from the point of view of a casual observer, just looking to slay some monsters. And then later, we'll begin drilling down into all the forbidden knowledge hidden within, and speculate on its implications. We know very little of the mysterious hunter whose shoes we step into at the start of this game, only that they came to Yharnam, the home of blood ministration, in search of a cure for a condition known as pale blood. Their origins and where they got their training is alluded to at character generation, but little else is said on the matter. The treatment begins with a transfusion of Yharnam blood, at which point, the gates of the abyss are seemingly opened, and all kinds of horror revealed. Like some kind of sleep paralysis demon, this monstrous predator stalks towards the hunter, as they are, seemingly, completely helpless on the operating table, and as it reaches a clawed hand out to claim its prey, a lash of fire snatches the hunter from the jaws of death, and sends the beast screeching back the way it came. But the hunter is far from free yet, as something disgusting now wants to get into their personal space. A lot of somethings. Are these their mysterious saviors? And did they only save them from the beast that they might inflict some far worse fate upon them themselves? The hunter is in no position to resist, and as they slip away into darkness, they hear a voice that is very soon going to become all too familiar to them.
You found yourself a hunter.
The hunter rises from their slumber to find they've been abandoned. There's no sign of any doctors or other patients, just an empty room, a locked door, and a cryptic note written by an unknown hand. Leaving via the only door that opens, the hunter descends the ominous dark staircase alone, unarmed and feeling far too vulnerable. And when they hear something up ahead, alarm bells might start going off inside them. Between the hunter and the exit, a large beast, possibly the same one from our previous nightmare, has interposed itself and is feasting on some freshly killed prey. This creature is not in a mood to be surprised at all. This is a classic Miyazaki Souls opener. Place something powerful in the player's path when they are unprepared in any way and at their most vulnerable. Then give them a way to escape, learn a little about the game, and come back when they're better equipped to deal with a dangerous threat later. This was, however, my second time playing the game, so yeah, moving on. The next thing of import that the hunter encounters are blood vials. These contain the miraculous Yharnam blood of the healing church that the hunter sought out, and a quick hit of this stuff can even bring a person back from the very brink of death. Seemingly, with no side effects at all. And with that, it's time for the big reveal as the hunter exits Yusofa's clinic and steps out into central Yharnam. Oh damn. Beneath a fire-washed sky sprawls the labyrinthine city of Yharnam, a place of towers that reach up into the blood-stained night sky and cast long, dark shadows that hide truly terrible things within them. Taking their first tentative steps into the city, the hunter encounters their first local, and while they're far more vocal than your average hollow, there is something wrong about their too long limbs and tangled hair. Their clothes don't sit right on them, making them look more like a mockery of a civilized person than an actual human. And they are just as opposed to you keeping your life as the majority of the population of any Souls game. And this guy got me. Rather than dying though, the hunter awakens slowly in another place. A place that doesn't seem altogether real. While there is ground beneath their feet, walls of stone in front of them, and plants and trees all around, there is a sense that all of this just abruptly ends beyond the wrought iron fences that guard this place. Like this is a small garden, hanging in an eternal void. And the horizon seems to confirm this. Within this place called the Hunter's Dream, the strange creatures from our first dream present us with little messages that encourage us to fight and even provide us with a couple of weapons to allow us to do just that. What helpful little guys they are. Too bad they weren't around before I was attacked by that mad Yharnam citizen with an axe. Still, this threaded cane looks nice, and that pistol is cool. Maybe they'll be of assistance in my next life. I wonder what that old doll is doing here. Approaching one of the many gravestones that dots this strange landscape, we see a sign that tells us we can return to Yosefka's clinic. And when we touch it... Wait. I'm back. I'm alive. I didn't die? Why? How? Was any of that real? I have the weapons though, which means now I can really fight back. And fighting back is exactly what our hunter does. It's when they ascend a ladder. What the hell was that? To an even higher level of this twisted vertical city, that something resembling a quest objective finally presents itself to the character and the player.
Oh, you must be a hunter.
It's entirely possible to miss the signs, of course, and on my first playthrough, I charged right past this window with the little light flickering outside it, not realizing at all that there was someone on the other side who was actually willing to talk to me and might even be able to help a little. The following question is named Gilbert, and he too is an outsider. He sounds very sick, and comments that he couldn't even walk if he wanted to. He thinks that Yharnam is cursed, and that the hunter should be looking for a swift exit from this town and its overly hostile residents. He's never heard of a condition called pale blood though, but he suggests heading to the cathedral ward, to the very heart of the healing church. This place is usually guarded from outsiders, but it seems tonight is the night of the hunt, and anything could go. So maybe the hunter's answers lie there. It's the closest thing to a direction they've had since receiving a transfusion anyway. And so the hunter begins battling their way through Yharnam's winding streets to try and make sense of this strange situation they found themselves in. But before we, the observer, can progress further, there are two other very important people that need to be met first. The first of these is encountered when the hunter touches one of these lanterns and returns to the safe embrace of the hunter's dream. The first time they arrived here, the church-looking building was all sealed up, and there wasn't any sign of life anywhere, other than the little messenger people anyway. When they return, however, the doors are flung open to reveal a fully fitted workshop for monster hunters and an old and frail figure bound into a wheelchair resting within. This is Gehrman, and he has surprisingly little to tell us given the strangeness of the circumstances of our meeting. He says he is a friend, and he tells the hunter only that this workshop was once a haven for hunters, and that they used blood to enhance their weapons and bodies. He tells the hunter not to think too hard about what's happening to them, but to just accept their situation and do exactly what it is that a monster hunter does. He offers the use of all his resources, modest as they are, and adds this ominous little statement.
You're welcome to use whatever you find. Even the doll, should it please you.
What the hell does that mean? And why say it like that? Then there's this message tucked away in the corner of the hunter's workshop. To escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts, lest the night carry on forever. So many questions. The answer to the doll riddle is revealed later when, during our hunt, we discover something called Madman's Knowledge. This strange little shattered skull has this to say for itself. Skull of a madman touched by the wisdom of the great ones, used to gain insight. Making contact with eldritch wisdom is a blessing, for even if it drives one mad, it allows one to serve a grander purpose for posterity. Insight? What kind of insight? What eldritch wisdom? Consuming it gives you 1 point in this little eye symbol here, and when you return to the dream of one of those, something has changed. The messengers now have new gifts for the hunter, bells that can summon other hunters from the past or other worlds to their aid. But more importantly, the doll is standing. That's not creepy at all. She is very comforting and sweet, however. She is here to help us by channeling blood echoes into our strength. Mechanically, she's how we level up. She has a little to say about Gehrman, that he was once a great hunter, but now only an advisor, and comments that the little messengers are friends of hunters too. But beyond that, she has nothing more to say, and Gehrman is nowhere to be found either. So what is this doll? How is it suddenly alive now? Was the madman's knowledge some kind of magic that animated it? No, that doesn't feel right. It says, used to gain insight. Insight. Understanding. Yeah, I don't like where this is going at all. So we have something like a setup. We know we are this hunter. We know we are seeking a cure for pale blood. We seem to be trapped in a repeating nightmare of blood and beasts. We've been given tools, allies, an immediate goal of reaching the cathedral to see what we can learn about blood ministration, and a larger goal of ending the source of this nightmare. But how does one slay a nightmare? Well, we've barely dipped a pinky into this abyss, and if we want even a chance of finding out, we're going to have to get fully submerged and swim down far into the depths to find places that even the light can't reach. Part of what makes the narrative of Bloodborne so difficult to piece together is that there are actually multiple factions pushing different agendas. In some cases, they are seeking to arrive at the same place through very different means, while others are out to fulfill their own, less specified agendas. In all cases, however, and the monsters that stalk the streets of Yharnam are merely the puppets of far more powerful and enigmatic forces than we can possibly imagine, and it's into this web of plots and schemes that our outsider has stumbled and become ensnared. At character generation, we know very little about the hunter. We get to customize their appearance and build to some degree. The animation sets create limits on what's possible without serious clipping, but the face morphing is quite robust, and allows us to create some truly cursed monstrosities. At the time of writing though, sculpted faces aren't really possible in Bloodborne on the PC. The custom vertex data stored in the face files can cause vertex explosions, which are about as bad as they sound. While certainly not lethal to anyone, exploding vertexes can obstruct massive areas of the screen, which, in a Souls game, can be something of a problem. Fortunately, over on Nexus Mods, the Vertex Explosion Fix mod by Rainmaker V2 can prevent this by disabling custom faces for the game. It sucks, but it's one of the trade-offs for a nice smooth 60 FPS experience, and for playing the game on PC. In time, I'm sure all of these issues will be ironed out though. So, aside from outfitting the hunter with fabulous hair, one of several truly magnificent mustaches, I mean, this is the real final boss right here, isn't it, guys? How do you even begin to choose? Also, outfitting yourself with a pair of Alucard from Hellsing-style sunglasses, 10 points for anyone who gets that reference, you get to choose a character background. This is a very brief summary of your character's past, and the background you choose will assign points into a few stats to reflect the life you led before you arrived here. The backgrounds range from a lowly waste of skin, who starts off bereft of any talents or perks, the aggressively average milk toast, for those who really don't want to commit to any kind of playstyle early on, all the way up to highly skilled professionals, strong bruisers with a violent past, or survivors who've had to develop a strong constitution to prevent the world from eating them alive. While most of the skills in Bloodborne are pretty easy to intuit the meaning of, and reflect those in any other RPG, including Dark Souls, blood-drenched stands out as... what the hell does this even mean? As with previous games, you can press the R3 button on the character sheet, or at the level up screen, to learn a little more about what each stat does. You can't, however, see what it means at character creation. Blood-drenched governs your ability with firearms. Just like all weapons in these games, better firearms have a base requirement in blood-drenched before they can be used, and pushing the number higher will increase damage. Firearms serve a very specific purpose in Bloodborne though, and we'll get into that when we talk combat. As with all RPGs, it's really hard to know the benefits of one build or another, or if you'll enjoy playing a certain way when you're right at the start of the game. Bloodborne supplies you with new weapons all the way through, and while the base upgrade materials are in near infinite supply, the strongest ones aren't. As such, it might not be until your New Game Plus or your first replay that you really get to lock in on a weapon set that you want to rock for the entire game. Unless you use a guide, of course. But where's the fun in that? The playthrough I used for this capture was my second full playthrough. Well, kinda. I skipped out on killing Kos and took the wake up ending for the first run, so I still had some getting good to do for this one. I considered using New Game Plus footage rather than just New Game, as I'd probably die less and complete areas more efficiently. After all, who wants to wade through hours of capture of them just dying? I mean, it happened anyway, but that's because I suffer for your entertainment. Even so, I knew this time I wanted to try my hand at the threaded cane through most of the game, and I planned on wielding Lady Maria's Rakuyo for the endgame, which meant I needed high skill levels. So I chose the professional background. I used the starter pistol all the way through my first playthrough, and I plan to do the same here. I'd sampled the Hunter relics as well, and had a few favourites, so again, I knew that Arcane was going to need a boost eventually. I will say, I'm tempted by the Gatling gun that showed up in the Old Hunters DLC, but that's a tale for another time. If it's your first playthrough and you're unsure though, just choose a high strength or skill background. The starter weapons for these scale very well, and you'll have plenty of fun and cool options by the end. So we have a little information about the Hunter. We know they're an outsider, we know they're a hunter, we know something about their past, that they came to Yharnam looking to cure some kind of blood disease, and we can even infer with some certainty that monsters aren't a problem exclusive to Yharnam in this world. Savage beasts at the very least seem to be common enough to warrant the existence of professional hunters. The Hunter does reveal more about themselves as we play though, not so much through their words, but their actions, especially when compared to previous Fromsoftware Souls protagonists. But we'll get to that later. For now though, we have a protagonist, so how about we start peeling back some of these layers and analysing our antagonists. The spoilers start here, though I'll hold back the best until much later. Just be aware, if you are here having never played this, and you're lucky enough to remain in the dark about the story, it's worth discovering for yourself. I won't hold it against you if you flee the video now to go do a full playthrough. Just come back and tell me I was right when you're done. For the rest of us, let's learn about the Healing Church. Central Yharnam has descended into some kind of organised chaos, to put it mildly. The first resident that we meet tries to burn us with a torch and slice us open with an axe, and there are other residents who are just collapsed in some state of exhaustion in the streets. Though there are ways to rouse these wholesome individuals. Exploring further, we find this isn't just a few random dissidents, but a somewhat organised mob of people, with strangely elongated limbs that make their physical attacks a little easier to read. Mangy, diseased-looking dogs, and larger, more obviously inhuman things, all acting out some kind of parody of a tradition. There are bonfires in the streets with huge beasts strung up and burning within them, while the crowds stare at them reverently, seemingly unaware that their appearance and actions imply something just as bestial in their nature as the creatures they're hunting. They patrol the streets of Yharnam and assault anyone that they don't know with extreme prejudice. They've even laid something like a few traps for the hunter to fall into if they aren't careful, but that's only the beginning of things. Within the sewers and waterways of the city, we find large hulking creatures, all but bereft of their humanity. These things look more like beasts walking on two legs than humans, and their clothes only serve to add to the absurdity of their appearance. The waters are infested with something like crawling corpses, and even the carrion crows here are large, diseased, and aggressive. When we finally get to the bridge to the cathedral ward, we discover it's impassable. We also find hulking beasts patrolling the area, eager to ensnare new prey. Then there's the people locked in their homes. Like the Eloi in the Time Machine, they've responded to some unknown call and barricaded themselves within, in some cases having wild parties, seemingly of the belief that this is quite normal, and that come dawn, all of this will just blow over. They are none too friendly towards outsiders either. What the hell is going on? After all, there seems to be something like a progression from this, to this, to this, which leads one to believe that these terrifying beasts, that warrant a full lockdown and a mob to burn them at the stake, were once the very people of the city. And looking around, it looks like everyone here is far past saving. But it gets worse, because of course it does. The bridge to the cathedral ward is very much closed, and attempting to advance across it brings us into contact with one of the things that strikes the greatest fear into all Souls gamers: their overpowered and merciless boss enemies. The cleric beast, while imposing, is something of a meat and potatoes fight for a returning Souls player. It's big, it has sweeping, well-telegraphed attacks, and the timing to avoid these aren't all that hard to figure out. It's also exceptionally vulnerable to fire, and while your resources are very limited at this early stage in the game, this can be exploited by taking time to fully explore the area and acquire as many blood echoes as you can before stepping up for the fight. So if the bridge isn't going to get us there, then we need to find a back door into this cathedral ward if we're going to find anything like answers around here. Unfortunately for us, this is going to see us coming up against something far worse than your average giant monster. If we weren't convinced that the beasts in this city were once the very people who lived here before, it all gets very much thrown in our faces when we meet the first real filter point in the game, that being Father Gascoigne. This man seems to be a hunter, just like us. He wears a cool-ass long coat, carries a trick axe and firearm into battle, and seems very adept at murdering beasts. However, we encounter the man taking more than a little pride in his work, and he really doesn't seem to be holding on to anything like his humanity anymore. And once his health gets low enough, something truly terrifying is unleashed within him. Well, that very much confirms things. Before we progress forward and start to unravel this story though, let's take a step back and look a little closer at what we just experienced. One of the defining features of a Souls game is its level design. The game spaces are winding labyrinths, focused around a very limited, often as few as one, number of checkpoints, and progressing through an area involves the player taking a long, winding path towards their goal, which then forks back around towards their checkpoint, and allows them to remove some kind of obstruction to create a shortcut. The city of Yharnam creates a very convincing illusion of a sprawling metropolis at a glance. However, it is actually a tightly woven network of passages that eventually loop back around to the Hunter's Lantern. It's a maze at first glance for sure, and a very dangerous one that can see all your progress undone and you thrown all the way back to the start, minus your blood echoes, with just a few poorly made choices. On the other hand, you are never really all that far away from safety and succor, and no matter how far forward you push, you will always find familiarity and sanctuary at the end of the road. This golden little thread of hope is precisely what keeps you edging further and further into unknown dangers. Even as your stockpile of blood echoes gets bigger, your healing blood vials and quicksilver bullets get lower, and the penalty for putting a single foot wrong becomes even greater. It's a perfect recipe for anxiety and horror, and the massive payoff and release of stress when you do finally unlock another door and find yourself staring down a clear route all the way back to safety makes all that stress seem somehow worthwhile. This is actually my favourite part of any Souls game. Of course, the high risk, high reward exploration goes hand in hand with the punishing combat, which we'll get to later. But it's far more exciting and engaging for me to creep through these death trap environments than just beating my head against a boss over and over. There's just a real thrill to edging forward through these densely packed streets, surrounded by things that hate you and desperately want to snuff you out and take everything that you've earned for yourself away from you, and really weighing up whether or not it's worth peeking around the next corner and risk stumbling into some kind of far more powerful enemy than you've encountered up until now, or running back the way you came to consolidate your power and resetting the enemies. You ask yourself why you keep progressing when turning back seems like the sensible idea, but you just can't help yourself because the mystery and the allure of what's waiting for you in the next room or chamber pulls at you from deep within, and the constant abuse from the enemies makes you want to do it just to spit in their faces for having the audacity to think that there was ever a chance they could stop you. It's not that I have a fetish for being beaten over the head until I wonder why I'm actually playing this game. That's actually why I'd argue that the boss fights are one of the weaker features of these games. It's the danger that makes it more exciting and engaging to explore the world. Whether it's an enemy waiting in ambush, an elite level threat patrolling ahead of you, seemingly daring you to walk into its zone of awareness, or this arsehole playing dead in his chair. And yes, he got me a second time in the DLC too. Every nerve in my body is fully lit up as I advance through the environment, and the relief I feel when I finally unlock a gate or open a door to see a safe route back to my bonfire or lantern is... well, without getting too graphic, we've all needed to use the bathroom now and then, and have, for various reasons, been forced to put it off for longer than we'd like. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, this is a crap analogy, so let's move on. The hunter enters the cathedral ward through a sewer that brings them out into the Oedon Chapel. This is one of the true safe havens in the entire game, and a spot that we'll be returning to regularly. We discover the secret of the sanctuary that this place provides from the Oedon Chapel dweller, who is just one of the nicest people to ever appear in any Souls game. Like, bro, how the fuck are you, man? This is actually my second time doing this, and it is just so nice to see a friendly face. He explains that the incense masks the scent of anyone inside the chapel, making it completely safe from the beasts. He talks about the hunt taking place outside right now as a regular event, something that has gone on for years and years and will be over by the dawn. Or rather, it usually is. That would certainly explain the people locked up in their homes, having soirees, and acting like the world isn't ending right outside their very doors. The dweller, however, thinks that the walls and doors of the people's homes aren't going to keep the evil out tonight. In fact, it may already be inside the homes of most people. We can certainly confirm that from our encounter with Father Gascoigne. He requests that the hunter tell anyone they encounter that there is sanctuary here, which is how we begin the first of our side quests. NPCs and quests in Souls games have their own distinct flavour. NPCs speak with the clarity of the average mad person you meet in Silent Hill, rarely if ever elaborate on anything they say, and have to be prodded multiple times to make sure that their conversation for this current section has been completely exhausted. Their locations are not always easy to find either. The first friendly NPC we meet, who doesn't speak to us through a window, is actually Eileen the Crow, and her first and second conversations can easily be missed, meaning you won't be able to play through her quest, and you'll likely wind up fighting her towards the end of the game. In our first encounter, she tells us that there are no humans here, only flesh-hungry beasts. She welcomes us though, and wishes us well on our hunt. Eileen is a hunter of hunters. When the seemingly endless nights of blood, claws, and gnashing teeth finally drive hunters into madness, she's tasked with putting them out of their misery before they begin seeing beasts everywhere and start straight up killing everyone in the city. Boy, we sure could have used her help with Father Gascoigne. Quests in these games aren't as straightforward as in other RPGs. We don't have a journal to keep track of them, or a map or a compass. We don't get checkpoints and updates on the status of the quest. Half the time, we don't even know we're specifically doing anything other than talking to the people we meet along our journey. Very often, stages in these quests can be concealed in hidden, difficult to traverse locations, and the people involved with them can be turned hostile or killed at any point during the game. Hell, they can even die off camera if you aren't paying attention to what's going on. Just like the rest of the game, these are mysteries to be unraveled. Some of them even have multiple outcomes, and you only get one shot per run to get it right. In Souls games, there are no quick saves, no reloads, and no do-overs. These days, of course, we have guides all over the internet, and if you're worried about missing anything on your first playthrough, there's no harm in checking them. But there is something of a thrill to stumbling into them for yourself, and I genuinely recommend trying it this way for your first time around. Trust me, if you can play one of these through to the end, you'll have at least one new game plus in you to hunt down the things that you missed the first time. And speaking of easily missable things, have we had absolutely any reason to go all the way back to the clinic recently? Nope. Well, there is a locked gate, I suppose, and a door. And there is this information about Yosefka's blood that pops up now and then. And Souls players have been somewhat conditioned to check around with NPCs post-boss battle. Gilbert, for example, has a flamethrower to offer us after we defeated Gascoigne, and of course, there's the old hunter's daughter to speak with. We encounter this poor soul during our exploration of central Yharnam, and she tells us that she's alone in her home, that her father has gone out to hunt the beasts, and her mother has gone to bring him home. She tells us her mother wears a red jeweled brooch, and even gives us a music box, saying that it helps her father to remember them when he forgets. So this madness consumes people slowly, it seems. We find the girl's mother not far from where we defeat Gascoigne, and when we report back to her, we have the option to send her to the chapel for safety. It's a long walk though. I really hope she makes it. So, while we're retreading this area and finding out if things have changed, we might also want to revisit the very clinic where we started. Unfortunately, the door at the top of the stairs is now locked, but Josefka can be spoken to through it. If we go back there relatively early, she'll say something along these lines.
Then I'm very sorry, but I cannot open this door. I am Josefka. The patients here in my clinic must not be exposed to infection.
But visiting her after we access the cathedral ward leads us to say this.
You're soon off to hunt, I presume? Then, if you find any survivors, tell them to seek Josefka's clinic.
That's certainly odd. And remember, there's no journal, and hours might have passed before you return here. You might not even remember what exactly it was she said to you the first time. Even so, there's something up with this. But the hunter now has two options for any survivors that they find. Well, I guess the third is let them stay in their homes. There's quite a variety of ways for how the quest to gather people can play out, depending on who you send to what location, and the specifics are better left until later in the video, where more and more spoilers can be found. We can at this point also meet Alfred for the first time, and learn a little about another faction operating within this world. Alfred introduces himself as a hunter of the vile bloods, and while the blood of the beasts we've been slaying so far can seem pretty vile, he's not talking about the beasts at all. Unlike some other characters we meet in the game though, Alfred is actually quite chatty, and is even willing to dole out something like a primer to Yharnam, the church, and his own profession if we ask him. Specifically asking about the healing church doesn't really provide us with any new revelations. All he can say is that they are the fountainhead for the blood healing that has made Yharnam so famous and prosperous, and that the hunters should head to their cathedral if they are in need of healing themselves. Where this conversation really gets interesting though, is when they ask about Byrgenwerth. According to Alfred, Byrgenwerth is a place of learning built atop ancient tombs for old gods. He claims that the scholars at this place actually found some kind of holy substance within these ancient tombs, and went on to found the healing church and blood ministry with it. There's a lot of red flags right there. Why would scholars start a church? Why not a hospital, or even a university? Clinics and hospitals are places to heal the sick, while colleges and universities exist to elevate people through education and create free and independent thinkers who can pioneer the next generation of learning and study. A religion, though, that's a system of control. A religion is what you make when you want to keep people in line and have them blindly obey you. It fuels fear of the unknown while dangling the golden thread of salvation that can only come from complete surrender to its ideology. It demonizes asking questions while praising blind obedience. It creates an insular society that is programmed to think they are the only ones who are righteous and everyone else should be viewed with distrust and suspicion. In short, it creates sheep that can be guided all the way to the slaughterhouse. So, good job there, guys. You nailed it. The Byrgenwerth College is now off limits. The church declared it to be forbidden ground. I wonder what they don't want people to learn. Access to this place is beyond a heavy locked door that requires an as yet unknown password. Then there's the Vile Bloods that Alfred hunts. He explains that this faction formed when one of the Byrgenwerth scholars took the healing blood to the nobles at Castle Cainhurst. However, the healing church declared that this was forbidden, and spread rumours that the nobles would corrupt the purity of the church. I'm starting to see why they made a religion. They wanted total control over the distribution of the product. The healing church eventually sent someone named Logarius and a lot of what they refer to as executioners to murder all the nobles at the castle, but it would seem that there are still some loose ends there, that our boy Alfred here would like to tie up. And look, Alfred comes across as very friendly and even endearing when we talk to him, but the fact he can't see any of the red flags that I can shows just how indoctrinated he is by the church. I'm sure in his mind his cause is righteous, and I've no love for the bourgeoisie myself. Right, Arishok?
Look at you. Like fat doth Russie, you feed and complain only when your meal is interrupted.
But I doubt these vile bloods are actually any more or less vile than the church itself. Clearly, our hunter needs to get to this cathedral and try to find some answers there. Unfortunately though, the gates that lead up to the front door are locked, and the church has plenty of, shall we say, interesting security guards patrolling the place. Yo, what's that weird light? What the hell just happened? You can, if you want to, farm up a bunch of blood echoes and just buy the key to this gate from the Bath Messengers in the Hunter's Dream. But when we head there, we find that old Hunter Gehrman has returned after a long absence, and finally has some wisdom to impart to us.
If the beasts loom large and threaten to crush your spirits, seek a holy chalice, as every hunter before you has. A holy chalice will reveal the tomb of the gods, where hunters partake in communion.
Well, it's still a bit vague, but there's a few routes we've yet to explore, so maybe we should save our echoes and go looking through these first. Verticality is a common feature of the worlds of the Souls genre. The extra dimension really helps to throw off the player's sense of direction and guide them round in a slow circle back to their checkpoint without them really realising it. Central Yharnam and the Cathedral Ward seem to be built on top of a burnt-out ruin known as Old Yharnam. This place is closed off and sealed up with a helpful note stuck to the door, one that reads, "This town is long abandoned. Hunters not wanted here." Unlike the previous locations, we don't find this place filled with half-men patrolling the streets with torches and pitchforks. We instead find nothing but beasts, and quite wretched-looking ones, all things considered. They fear fire and take a lot of damage from it, and can attack in large numbers to overpower an unprepared hunter. This place is not only old, but it's long abandoned. Well, almost.
You're there! Hunter! Didn't you see the warning? Turn back at once. Old Yharnam, burned and abandoned by men, is now home only to beasts. They are of no harm to those about. Turn back, for the hunter will face the hunt.
Atop the clock tower, we meet, after a fashion anyway, another hunter. One who would much rather see us go back the way we came than come forward and bring down harm upon these beasts. This character is called Jura, and under the right circumstances, it's actually quite possible to befriend him. But his default state is to view you as a threat to these creatures and rain down hell upon you from above. I have actually yet to befriend the old hunter, choosing to respond to violence in kind, and seeing him off the edge of the tower he set his Gatling gun upon. We'll talk a little more about the Hunter's Workshop and the various sub-factions that exist within it later. What's important here though is that Jura is technically correct. Old Yharnam is a dark echo of what Yharnam itself will eventually become. It fell to a beast scourge of its own a long time ago, and while many hunters tried to cull the numbers back, the district was ultimately lost and put to the torch. While this little town is now occupied only by beasts, and seems almost frozen in the events of its final night, with crucified monsters still aflame, the residents are happy to stay tucked away in their little part of the world, and leave everyone alone. And Jura is here to make sure that no one from the outside shows up to make trouble for them. He sees they've clearly suffered enough, and given the fate that hunting led Father Gascoigne to, I'd say living out his days trying to protect something from dying rather than actively trying to kill things, might be just what he needs to save his humanity. What we're really doing here, though, is heading down to the church at the very bottom of this little hamlet. It's here we'll find the blood-starved beast, a strange creature with an effeminate build, whose skin has seemingly been flayed from its bones, with large flaps of it just hanging off its body. What makes this boss especially challenging is the poison aura it gives off that can make hitting it, or even just approaching it, very dangerous. Our objective at the end of all this, though, is the acquisition of the Pthumerian Chalice. The chalices are the keys that unlock the Chalice dungeons. This was a feature unique to Bloodborne, and one that offered potentially limitless play. While the dungeons do have a lore purpose, and even some unique bosses to encounter within them, they differ from the world we've been exploring up until now, in quite a few ways, for quite a few reasons. The big one being that Chalice dungeons are procedurally generated. Game design is a lengthy and iterative process, and a lot of work is left on the cutting room floor by the time the product ships. The working conditions are also famously terrible in large studios, with mandatory overtime, very often unpaid, and crunch being a norm of the industry. The only reason you don't hear about it as much from Japanese studios is because 12-hour shifts and 6-day working weeks are just the norm over here in many industries, and people just think that this is how work gets done. Remember kids, regular and normal are not the same. My point here is that game design is hard, and studios need to think carefully about the features they're going to commit their resources to. In the 2000s to the 2010s, escort quests were famously the bane of many an otherwise great game. Bad AI and pathfinding meant that the player would end up seeing more than one game over screen that just objectively wasn't their fault, and this would make people furious. Resident Evil 4, however, made it work. Well, most of the time at least anyway. The game commits a not insignificant amount of its runtime to escorting Ashley around hostile locations, and while she can get in the way of the occasional shot that you're trying to line up, she generally does a good job of staying close to Leon, keeping out of his way, and following him without needing tricks to just load her back in if she gets a certain distance away. The difference is that most escort quests might be 1 or maybe 2 levels in a much larger game, and so they didn't warrant the commitment of a massive amount of resources to get it perfect. The mechanics would be worked on until they were good enough, and the playtesters would do enough to make sure it wasn't utterly broken or going to softlock someone out of finishing the game. However, once the game got released and wound up being played by tens of thousands or even millions of people, the problems that hadn't been foreseen would eventually be revealed. In RE4, on the other hand, the escort quest was a recurring and deeply important feature of the game, and so great lengths were taken to make sure that having Ashley around didn't detract from the fun or see the player losing to a mistake that the AI had made. All this is a very roundabout way of me getting to why I'm not really the biggest fan of the Chalice dungeons in Bloodborne. Perhaps when you heard me talking about how much I enjoy exploring the detailed, handcrafted levels, you saw this coming. But the Chalice dungeons wore out their welcome very quickly with me, and I only engaged with them minimally during my playthrough. And the reason for this is procedural generation. Now it's true that the initial chalices that a player can find aren't randomized in the way that root chalices are, but they're made up of all the same parts and suffer from the same problems with constant repetition as the dungeons created by the root chalices do, so my point here stands for all the Chalice dungeons. Procedural generation is one of those things that sounds amazing on paper. What if you could just give a computer a tile set and a list of rules, and have it randomly generate entire levels or even worlds for you? If it were possible, then every player could wind up visiting a world entirely of their own and having an adventure completely unique to themselves. The problem though is it rarely works out like this. Oh yeah, games like No Man's Sky use procedural generation to create entire universes, and that game's a banger. But let's not forget it had a very rough launch, and it's only through constant community feedback and years of updates that it's become the game that it is now. Most procedurally generated worlds give the game away very quickly. They might surprise you for a while, but sooner or later the repetition creeps in, and the illusion of a unique world space crumbles in the face of what you're actually faced with. A snap pack. Let's jump into Unity here to look at how things really work. So, this is a modular environment that I got from a game dev humble bundle. I believe this is Dark Fantasy Gigantic Environment by Tropical Studio. Modular sets work similar to tile sets from 2D games. They're easy to work with, quick to reorganize, and are very resource efficient when rendering thanks to many meshes sharing the same texture atlas. Placing these pieces next to each other though would quickly reveal the repetition in the texture. To break this up, details need to be added to the space. First we lay down the basic geometry, then, running from big to small, we add features and clutter and use lighting to create an area that feels both functional and lived in. A place with a story to tell. For an experienced level designer working alongside art and narrative directors, they can move with intention to create a space that evokes feeling and encourages the player to explore it. Then they can hide all kinds of things in there so that even on a third or fourth visit, the player may still be stumbling into points of interest. It just takes time. Now you could take each one of these pieces, assign snap points to them, and create a series of rules for what can and can't snap to them, and in what orientation it's allowed to be when it does. Then you could rigorously test it over and over to make sure it doesn't create anything truly absurd. Likewise, you could place a marker here that spawns clutter from a list rather than simply placing the same clutter every time. There are lots of ways you could increase the variations, but each time you do, you're creating a bigger demand on system resources when creating the dungeons, making more opportunities for mistakes, and requiring longer and longer playtesting times to make sure it all works correctly. This leads to the question of, just how big of a feature are the procedurally generated parts of the game? Again, maybe a game that markets itself on everyone existing in a completely unique universe can commit the kinds of resources needed to make this happen. But when we're talking about a relatively small feature of your game, you're better off just making 20 or so rooms, allowing them to snap together at the doorways, and creating an algorithm that just shuffles them around a bit. Now, am I accusing the Bloodborne devs of being lazy or half-arsing this part of the game? No, not at all. Based on what little I know of procedural generation, the fact that it works at all, and doesn't just drop you into an impossible labyrinth or a pit that lets you fall forever, is massively impressive. Likewise, the choices they made were smart. They understood their limits and worked within them. But had the game been made just for me, I would have wanted one more handcrafted environment to explore, rather than thousands of variations of the same 24 corridors and rooms. Bloodborne, though, was not made just for me. The Souls fandom actually has gamers with quite a variety of interests. Everything from deep lore seekers looking to fully expose the mystery, to hardcore challenge runners who live for the thrill of high-risk, high-reward combat. While I am very much in the former camp, the latter camp will enjoy these dungeons a lot more. As they get near infinite iterations to battle through, they can battle bosses old and new, find better loot, and make the numbers go up and up. That doesn't mean that the Chalice dungeons exist outside of the Bloodborne lore. Oh no. They play a big role here too, if you're prepared to search for it. They may in fact be the source of all the horror we've encountered up to this point. The world is a graveyard. Everything grows atop the corpses of things that came before, and even civilizations are constructed atop the remains of older ones that fell in a time before recorded history. The catacombs that can be reached via the chalices exist deep beneath the ground on which Yharnam now stands. Their construction, and the fact that they've withstood the test of time, implies incredible knowledge and craftsmanship on behalf of their creators. These were clearly made by people who had access to great knowledge and resources, a powerful civilization that somehow vanished from the face of the earth, became buried beneath it, and lost to time. We have numerous similar legends in our world. From Atlantis to El Dorado, we love the idea of lost worlds full of treasure and ancient knowledge that was somehow swept beneath the land and the sea, never to be seen again. But who crafted these wondrous tunnels? Well, they're still here. after a fashion anyway. Within the Chalice dungeons we encounter enemies called the Pthumerians. These are emaciated, seemingly undead creatures that have the same elongated limbs and staggering gait as the Yharnamites we meet at the start of the game. They are almost universally hostile to intruders. This is, after all, their home, and whether or not we are here with the intention of looting the place, people who came before us have done just that. We know from previous conversations that the scholars of Byrgenwerth took something from here, something that became the foundation of the Healing Church and their blood healing. We can also find outfits that belong to a sect called the Tomb Prospectors. So venturing into this highly dangerous labyrinth and bringing back relics of this lost civilization was clearly a lucrative pastime. And there are numerous treasures and shrines littered all around these dungeons, even now. The technology required to construct these vast subterranean labyrinths doesn't really match up with that of ancient civilizations. Then there's the fact this highly advanced civilization, seemingly, disappeared off the face of the earth for a long time without anyone's knowledge. The creatures we encounter down here all seem to be changed in a similar fashion to what's happening to the people in Yharnam right now. Could it be that some sort of cycle is repeating itself? And let's not forget what Gehrman said about visiting this place.
A holy chalice will reveal the tomb of the gods, where hunters partake in communion.
Communion with the old gods? What old gods? Perhaps the answers to these questions lie at the deepest levels of these catacombs. Or maybe the revelations will be found out there in Yharnam. The beast scourge that has all but overrun Yharnam by the time we arrive didn't appear spontaneously overnight. Rather, it seeped into the world little by little. When the first beast began murdering its way around the city, it was probably considered a single isolated incident rather than the beginnings of a new plague. Given how big and prosperous Yharnam is, and the fact that most news traveled by word of mouth or other analog means, it's entirely likely that there were plenty of people who didn't even believe it, if they even heard of it at all. After all, this was Yharnam, home of the Healing Church. What plague or beast wound was there that couldn't be fixed with a shot of the miraculous blood of their clerics? Sometime before the church even acknowledged that the beast scourge was a real threat, Yharnam was protected by a mysterious savior. A single man who saw the very real threat of the slowly increasing number of beasts, armed himself with special trick weapons and tools of his own design, and set out to take back the night from these new horrors. That man was named Gehrman, and he constructed his very own workshop to commit his time and resources to fighting the beasts of the night, and even inspiring others to do the same. The nightly hunts culled back the number of beasts that had come to infest the city, and it might never have occurred to Gehrman that the monsters who stalked the night were the very same people he was putting himself on the line to protect. But this was not a war that one man could wage alone, and as the threat of the beasts grew, it soon became time for the biggest and most resourceful authority in the city, the Healing Church, to step in and start doing their share. With the blood-starved beasts slain, we find these doors in the Oedon Chapel now wide open, and ascending the elevator found within, we can access the Healing Church's workshop and... well, damn. What a mess this place is. The champion of the Healing Church was a cleric named Ludwig. As well as training an entire church army of hunters to fight the Scourge, he also empowered the regular people of Yharnam to fight back. This actually explains the fanatical mobs of pitchfork-wielding civilians that we've been fighting our way through this entire time. The Healing Church is not one monolithic power, but an organization that has multiple different departments, not all of which get along. They are certainly united on blood healing good and beasts bad, but once we peel back the skin and start poking around at the secrets found inside, we'll discover some very different, even opposing ideas at play. Within the depths of the church's workshop, it's actually possible, though certainly difficult, to reach this door and arrive here. Huh. So it's not just a dream. It's a memory. Oh wow, there's a doll here too. Ooh, nice drip. I wonder if she'll notice. Actually, what does the item description say? Discarded doll clothing, likely a spare for dress-up. A deep love for the doll can be surmised by the fine craftsmanship of this article, and the care with which it was kept. It borderlines on mania, and exudes a slight warmth. What? Ew. So this was Gehrman's real hunter's workshop. Once the church stepped in with all their influence and resources, Yharnam no longer needed their first hunter and his ragtag collection of beast killers. And following another personal tragedy, Gehrman just vanished one day. Which is odd, because we find him in the dream. He seems okay with his talking doll, and he's still helping from the shadows in his own way, but...
Oh, Lawrence, Master Willem, somebody help me. Unshackle me, please. Anybody. I've had enough of this dream. The night blocks all sight. Oh, somebody, please.
So he's here against his will? What the hell could be keeping him here? The Bath Messengers in the Hunter's Dream are the merchants of the game. They are down to trade a small variety of items with the Hunter at the start, but their stocks can be expanded, providing the Hunter has the right token to show them. The workshops and their hunters actually subdivide down into various factions, and each faction has a token of their own that can be acquired as we go on our adventure. We've already met Eileen the Crow, Alfred, and Jorah, all of whom represent a different faction. Eileen is the Hunter of Hunters, someone sent to take down the hunters who become too drunk on the blood of their foes and maddened by the seemingly endless nights of slaughter. Alfred is part of the fanatical Wheel Hunters, who were founded by Master Logarius and sworn to slay the vile bloods of Cainhurst. Jorah is one of the Powder Keg Hunters, a seemingly heretical sect that loved guns and big explosions. I suspect they had more than a small hand in what happened to old Yharnam, and that would certainly explain why Jorah is so adamant that no more harm comes to the beasts therein. Throughout the game there's quite a variety of badges we can collect, and each unlocks a collection of weapons, armour, and useful tools at the Bath Messengers shops, both the regular one, where things are paid for with blood echoes, and the insight one, where things are paid for with insight. There's actually quite a useful trick to play on a certain boss here too, but we aren't quite there yet. There's also a third messenger bath around the back of the workshop here. These guys don't do anything practical, but there are several cosmetic items that can be found around the world and handed over here. These range from adorable ribbons to adorable top hats. And if you give one of these to them here, the ones that guard the various lamps around the world will also be wearing that item. It doesn't explain in any way what they are or why they're helping us, but it is cute. And really, does it need to be any more complicated than that? The workshop is also where we can upgrade our weapons. On our adventure, we will encounter blood shards of various kinds. The smallest of these are in near infinite supply, as many an enemy can drop them, and they can eventually be bought in the shops. But the largest of these, the blood rocks that will get your weapon up to +10, well, you can probably count the number of those that you'll find in a single playthrough on one hand. While it's not available at first, the hunter does eventually come across a tool called the Rune Workshop tool. The description for this reads: Runesmith Carol, student of Bergenworth, transcribed the inhuman utterings of the Great Ones into what are now called Carol runes. The hunter who retrieves this workshop tool can etch Carol runes into their mind to attain their wondrous strength. Provost Willem, would have been proud of Carol's runes, as they don't rely upon blood in any measure. Great ones? You don't say. What great ones are we talking about? Because, you know, I'm pretty great. Great enough for y'all to like, subscribe, and comment on the video, right? And who the hell is Willem? What's he got against blood? While leveling up your weapon is arguably the best way to significantly increase your damage output, Carol runes can also be a game changer in their own way. Bloodborne and Souls games in general are very conservative with how they dole out buffs. Items are a one-time use, and if you die while using one, you're going to have to buy them again if you want to use them again. We're not talking survival horror levels of limitations here. I know some people are adamant this game is survival horror, and I do see similarities, but I don't think it checks enough boxes to even fall into the more forgiving modern survival horror genre. Even so, these games make you think very carefully about when and where to deploy your resources for maximum effect. Certainly, stacking up a few buffs together will see you doing mad damage to a boss, and hopefully blazing through their health before you make a serious mistake. But you still need to know their attack patterns, or you're just going to get wrecked and lose those items in the process. Since Carol runes are etched into your mind though, well, they stay with you until you switch them out. The runes can be found all over the place, and even come in stronger and weaker variants. You can have 3 regular buff runes and one that comes from a covenant. Covenants are one of those things that have never made a great deal of sense to me in Souls games. Certainly I know what they are, and that they do something. But that's about it. A lot of it seems to be connected to online play and invasions, and I don't have any time for that nonsense. Since not knowing what their purpose is generally doesn't impact your game, I just never felt the need to look into it. I kinda like visiting that dragon in the weird backrooms part of OG Dark Souls though. You know what I'm talking about. The Covenant runes in this case do provide buffs, and we can, potentially, join Alfred's Radiance Covenant, or even his sworn enemies, the Vile Bloods. Or there's the Milkweed rune that does... yeah, something. You know, it might be time to reveal a little bit more about what is actually going on here. But before we can do that, how about we finally get into this cathedral and see if anyone there can tell us what the hell any of this even is. The road to the Grand Cathedral has plenty of twists and turns, and if we can all be honest with ourselves for a moment, we know there are no answers waiting for us there. Come on, this is a Souls game. That's a giant cathedral. We know there's going to be nothing even remotely like exposition in here. There's going to be a fight. A big one. So let's get distracted. After descending through the depths of the church workshop, the hunter emerges into yet more dark and winding alleyways of Yharnam. Danger lurks around every corner in the form of rabid hunter mobs, dogs, and then there's this ominous, oversized figure just standing vigil in the street, waiting, almost daring someone to step into his threat range. It is possible to zip behind this imposing figure, but honestly, you know at some point you're going to wind up face to face against one of these, so why not now really? Especially if a backstab is wide open for the taking. These guys pop into existence after the blood-starved beast is slain, and are usually concealed in areas where they can creep upon you unnoticed while you engage other enemies and smash you over the head with their massive fists, or that huge sack on their shoulder. And by all the gods of the sea and the sky, these things hit hard. Welp, I guess I'm going back to my lantern to think about my life choices. Hang on. What? Wow, are we having a Skyrim Sanguine moment here? I guess that explains what's in the bag. Apparently, it's functional as a mode of transport and a weapon. And once I'd been incapacitated, I was packed up inside it and lugged all the way to wherever the hell this is. Quite possibly being used as a weapon to smash other people along the way. Which would certainly explain the lower back pain I'm experiencing. The prison is in a state of repair befitting of the rest of the city. And much like the Yharnamites and clergymen we see patrolling the streets, these larger snatchers seem to be acting out a kind of parody of their lives, going through the motions of a programmed routine, without any real comprehension as to why they're doing it. This would explain why one of them bought the hunter here, and then didn't lock the door to their cell, enabling them to just walk out and start causing trouble again. This area, called the Hypogean Jail, is inhabited by multiple bagmen, and the cells are filled with many other, newly minted inmates, none of whom are especially happy to be sharing a confined space with an outsider. The external area is populated by a lot of dogs, ideal for people tracking, and even a couple of giant pigs because... why not, I guess? Dying in this area doesn't return you to your lantern either. It simply returns you to your cell, meaning you are cut off from the Bath Messenger's shop until you locate the lantern in this area. Certainly, it's not all that far from the cell we start in, but it's not exactly signposted either, meaning you could, in fact, run all the way through this tunnel that must have been used for some other inmate's Shawshank-style escape, and rush to freedom behind the prison, only to run slap bang into a battle with this guy, who isn't actually all that difficult, but on a first playthrough is most certainly going to be a problem for a while. Once you actually reach the lantern, you can just teleport out back to the Hunter's Dream and pick up your adventure where you left off, but it's worth exploring this place a little now. Outside we find various prison carts parked in a somewhat disorderly fashion, and for the love of all gods, make sure you run down this side alley and open this door. You will thank me later. But the whole area is oddly cut off. There's a set of ominous looking double doors that are tightly sealed up, and an elevator that can't be activated from this side. But whatever any of this is connected to, we can't go there yet, meaning this place is probably somewhere we're returning to later. There is a person here that we can save though. We can find a weeping and praying nun hidden in the depths of the jail. She's one of the few, seemingly, sane people still left in the entire city. Like us, she too was snatched from the streets and dragged here against her will. Not that she'll impart that information to just anyone. She's praying for aid. Aid from her religion. From a saint. I like this little touch actually. She'll only open up to the hunter if they're wearing church attire. And it's not that hard to intuit this without a guide, just by listening carefully to what she's saying. We can send her to the chapel after where... well, let's just say... things... can happen. Okay, that's one detour out of the way. So can we finally get into this damn cathedral? Well, sure. Nothing was stopping us from going there, but Bloodborne just isn't like other girls in that regard. In terms of branching paths and optional content, I'd say Bloodborne is actually the best of all the Souls games that I've played so far, and I really felt compelled to just smash my head against a boss over and over. There was, for a lot of the time anyway, usually somewhere else to explore if I just wanted a break. At the gate to the cathedral, we can turn back and get lost in yet more winding streets. This is where we'll recruit a couple more people into our cozy little chapel family, while we wait for all this to blow over. If we're exceptionally unlucky, we'll find... why are there illithids here? Oh god, I do not need this on top of everything else. Noping out of the cathedral fight and cutting right will bring you into contact with two more non-too-friendly hunters, a couple of big axe boys, and another sealed up door waiting for the right moment to be opened. Maybe I should stand on her... What the hell is going on? Going left, on the other hand, will bring you into a massive, optional area called Hemwick Charnel Lane. There are plenty of reasons to visit here, one being that the rune tool is located at the end of this maze of psychopaths and brick trolls. But I think we've been distracted enough for now. So let's finally open these damn doors and see if we can't speak to the management here. Okay? You sure? You don't want to do a chalice dungeon or something first? No? Okay then. Excuse me, Mom? Hi, Protagonist-kun here. I think I'm lost. I missed this left turn at Albuquerque, and now I don't seem to be able to die and... Oh, I'm sorry. I've been doing so many murders recently that I completely forgot that I was supposed to be finding a cure for pale blood. If you... Mom, are you even listening to me? Damn it, why does this always happen when I talk to girls? From the outset of this journey, we have been butting heads with some kind of corruption. Something that has worked its way into every person in the city and transformed them into monstrous parodies of themselves that can't see what they've become, even when it could be more obvious to anyone looking at it from the outside. It is in many ways an allegory for any cult-like mentality. And at the heart of all of it, where we are supposed to find the healing we've been seeking, the full extent of the corruption is laid bare. It is now beyond doubt that these monsters were born of the blood of the healing church, and that the hunters have, in fact, been systematically murdering the very citizens of Yharnam to maintain this bizarre status quo, even recruiting the people themselves into the fight who, in their ignorance, slay and put to the torch their own friends, family and neighbours with righteous fury, oblivious to the fact that they themselves could be the ones transformed, crucified and set aflame only a few nights later. While Vicar Amalia has all the trappings of a typical Souls boss, she's not that hard, providing you've been paying attention to how the game has been conditioning you to play it. Coming from games like Devil May Cry, Darksiders or the Arkham and Mordor games, Souls combat seems so pared back as to be laughably simple at a glance. But once you get over the absolute violation to all things good and sacred in the world that is, press R1 instead of X to attack, and realize that actually, you know what, this really does make more sense. You'll find quite a deep system here that, despite the reputation of these games, is surprisingly accessible. None of these games rely on knuckle-busting combinations that really belong in fighting games, or intense aerial juggling, rapid weapon switching, or split-second animation cancelling. Weapons have a simple animation set, but there's a big variety of them, with different speeds, reach lengths, and attack styles. Some do big sweeping attacks with wide arcs that can hit a lot of enemies. Others do fast flurry attacks with less damage per hit, while yet others are big unwieldy weapons that are slow, but hit with utterly devastating force. And it's really just a matter of personal preference as to which you use. The team wanted to bring something new to the table this time though. This wasn't Demon Souls or Dark Souls, this was Bloodborne. And you weren't a wretched hollow, you were a hunter of beasts, and they wanted that to be expressed in the way the character moved and fought. Other Souls games, especially those from other studios, have experimented with bringing in features from other third-person action games, such as combos and juggling, to various degrees of success. But Fromsoftware had plenty of ideas of their own to play with. While they wanted a more intense, visceral feel to the combat, they didn't want to raise the difficulty ceiling any higher. Miyazaki, in his own words, said that,
"From the very beginning of the planning stages, the premise of this game was a full-fledged game for game lovers."
But difficulty in these games isn't just some blunt instrument that you bludgeon the player over the head with. Again, in his words,
"Difficulty that creates a feeling of achievement must always be something that can be overcome. It's not a matter of simply making it endlessly harder."
So they felt that they were good where they already were with Dark Souls, and wanted to wiggle around within those parameters to create their augmented hunter experience. So how did they achieve that? We've already touched on the trick weapons that the hunters get access to. Weapons in this game have two forms. The iconic cleaver seen in all of the promotional material has a longer and shorter form. The longer has slower attacks with great reach, and a wide arc to hit multiple enemies, while the shorter has a faster attack that gains bonus damage to beasts for being serrated. The trade-off is that you need to get closer to them, which increases the risk of being mobbed. The threaded cane that I mained through the first half of the game easily has the longest range of any of the starter weapons, but the transformed state doesn't have a charged heavy attack, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be hitting the scenery just as frequently as you are the enemies. Regardless of your weapon, attacking is as simple as press button to hit enemy. You have a basic attack and a slower heavy attack that can be charged up. Attacking an enemy from behind with a fully charged heavy attack will drop them into a prone position and leave them wide open for a critical hit, which are called visceral attacks in this game. Okay, Pixie, hold still a moment. There, that got it. Oh god, Pixie, no! Pixie, stop! Oh my god! This is only half of the battle though. The other half is dodge rolls. We've all seen the memes, and we all love them. The majority of Souls games have an evade animation that features iframes. To put it simply, during a portion of the animation, the player's hitbox is briefly turned off, allowing them to clip through an enemy's damage box without consequence. Being able to understand the timing of this on an intuitive level is basically what separates the men from the boys in these games. To accommodate the more aggressive playstyle though, the team tweaked the classic dodge roll. We're not flailing around trying to escape here. We're the ones in control, and we're just moving ourselves into a more advantageous position. Locking onto an enemy switches out the dodge roll for a quick step that I will, from here on out, refer to as schwumping. You know, like schwump, schwump, schwump. There's also this old hunter bone tool that makes it even more schwumpy, so more like schwamp. Okay, now I see where the guys that don't nod got their ideas for their vampire game. Game is absolutely peak. That's what the cool kids say now, right? Peak. 5, 6. Yeah, I'm cool. The schwump is combined with enemy AI that punishes retreating hunters. Zipping backwards to create space is only going to set your enemies coming after you. Father Gascoigne pounds this into your head until you get it. Hunters don't retreat. They don't hide behind armor or shields. Instead, they stick to their targets, schwump to their flanks when they advance, and either smash into their vulnerable sides or create space to heal after. All of this is regulated by your stamina gauge. Now, what I'm about to say is purely a vibes thing, and in all fairness, this is not my first Souls game, so I'm used to dealing with this little limitation on my actions. But stamina honestly feels a lot more generous in this game than others. Maybe it's because Bloodborne doesn't have any armor or equipment load to factor into its calculations, but I rarely found myself being held back by a lack of stamina. There were occasionally moments where I had a wide open target and wasn't able to attack, but it never stopped me escaping a bad situation. Even so, it's always there, dangling over your head like the sword of Damocles, reminding you that restraint is the better part of valor, and it makes you pick your moments to move in and stick to your prey. But wait, there's more. 2 other critical systems were introduced to really transform the experience, those being firearms and the rally mechanic. Rallying is a simple but effective method to incentivize you to stay in the fight. When you take damage, instead of losing your health straight away, the health that you can potentially lose becomes discolored, and you have a short time to get it back by damaging enemies. Because these games always have a hard limit on how many healing items you'll have access to between runs, being able to recover health without expending a resource is a huge benefit, but it's a gamble. You have to move fast, and you may not be able to create an opening, meaning that chasing down lost health could lead to you losing more in the process. Like all things in this game, Rally is a tool to be deployed at the right moment for maximum effectiveness, as are your Quicksilver bullets and firearms. Figuring out how to make guns work in Bloodborne was something of a challenge. Interviews suggest that they wanted to add them in to be both period accurate and to add a new dimension to the combat, but they really didn't want to turn Bloodborne into a shooter. The saving grace of this setting is that, while guns existed, their range and accuracy wasn't all that great, and things like wheel-lock pistols only held a single shot before a lengthy reload process was required. This meant it probably wouldn't be too hard to include guns in a game with a mostly melee focus. The method they chose was twofold. First, they placed a hard limit on how many bullets a player can carry per run, and second, they hijacked an existing mechanic from Dark Souls to use these guns with. That being the parry. So there are a variety of weapons in the game that range from flamethrowers to cannons, and depending on your build and playstyle, you can actually dole out some serious raw damage from a distance. Me personally though, I didn't raise my blood tinge level very high, and stuck with the starter pistol all the way through both my playthroughs. While this weapon doesn't do a whole heap of damage, even when leveled up, well-timed shots during enemy attack animations will stagger them and leave them open for a visceral attack. And this, for me at least, is easily the most fun part of the game. Plenty of bosses and otherwise challenging elite level enemies can be put out to commission very quickly by a hunter who's willing to learn the timings to exploit this mechanic. Where it differs from the standard shield parry is it's both more generous with its timing and can be performed at range. The bagmen are a great example here. Their attacks are slow and have a long wind up. At least the attacks they do before they engage their berserk modes do. However, you don't have to stand in range of their attacks waiting for the moment to fire like you would with a shield. You can shrump back out of range, fire the shot from safety, and shrump back in if you get the hit. This can even work on a challenging boss like the Orphan of Kos if you're paying attention. And you will have a lot of chances to pay attention to this guy. So you may as well learn. Ammunition comes from Quicksilver bullets, and these can be bought from the Bath Messenger shop and also found all over the map. You can carry up to 20 at a time without augmentation from a rune. If you pick up more than 20, then those bullets are sent back to the workshop to be used in your next run, and if you do run out, you can take a hit to your health to replenish 5 bullets. Quicksilver bullets also power your hunter tools. These are the game's spells. The magic in this game isn't as robust as in Dark Souls, but there's a good variety of useful tools that can make a situation easier when needed. I'm something of a fan of the old Hunter's Bone for the super shrump ability it provides, the empty Phantasmal Shell for extra arcane damage on my weapons, and the Beast Roar to just push enemies off cliffs. Using any of these will deplete your Quicksilver rounds by different amounts, so you need to pick your moments to bust these out, much like with everything else. As great as all this sounds, there are a lot of hunter enemies to face around the map, and these guys all have guns and tools of their own to use against you. So you may find yourself raging about their existence as much as appreciating them at some point. Since we're talking fighting, we should probably address the changes to the healing system here, before we finish up with Vicar Amalia and uncover what she's hiding. You're going to be healing a lot on a first playthrough of any Souls game. This is generally handled through the consumption of a finite resource. Consuming said resource requires an unskippable animation to play, during which time you will be unable to attack or dodge out of the way of danger. Enemy AI, and boss AI especially, is programmed to take advantage of this and punish you for healing within their threat radius. If your animation is cancelled by their attack, then you not only don't receive the healing you were hoping for, but you incur more damage from the hit, and in case of many a boss fight, 2 hits can be all it takes. So there is this kind of dance of timing and spacing, with the hunter shrumping in to damage the prey, slipping to the sides of their attacks, and then backing out again to recover their health. In Dark Souls, the resource in question is Estus, which is kept at a relatively small number of hits per run, with no way to replenish without visiting a bonfire. This makes the availability of healing a kind of limiter on progress. You move forward, fighting enemies and taking hits along the way, but once your healing items get low, you find yourself really weighing the pros and cons of pushing just a little further versus retreating back to safety to consolidate your power and level up. Rather than Estus flasks though, Bloodborne has blood vials that contain the blood of the healing church. You can find these everywhere around the map. Buy them at the Bath Messenger, and you have a stock of 20 available to you per run. Just like Quicksilver bullets, any blood vials you pick up during your run can be added back into your stack, but if it's full, they're sent to your stash in the Hunter's Dream to be used in another run. The big problem here is the hard limit on the total number of available vials. You will never run out of Estus in a Dark Souls game, but you can and will run out of blood vials here. This will happen most frequently when fighting a boss. While trying to figure out these guys, you'll be burning through your vials in their hundreds, meaning you will at some point be respawning with no blood vials and no blood echoes to buy any more. And look, sometimes taking a break from a boss is exactly what you need to step back from the situation and approach them again with a cool head. I personally love a good shopping trip when I'm butting up against a tough boss. Just go back to an earlier area, kill a bunch of things, and buy some things from the shop, not because they'll help you now, but because they're nice, and you want them, and you're worth it. But I want that to be my choice. I don't want to have to walk away from a fight that I'm just starting to feel like I'm getting the hang of, to murder my way through a few previous areas, just so I can restock my healing items. I completely get how doing it this way works much better with the Bloodborne specific combat, but there needed to be some kind of cushion to stop things getting this bad. So finally, putting all this together, the trick weapons, the items, the firearms and hunter's tools, the blood vials and quicksilver bullets, the schwamping and rallying, it adds up to a formula where, far from the hunter being on the back foot against a city full of beasts and monstrosities, the most dangerous thing in Yharnam, by no small margin, is them. There are several revelations on the other side of Vicar Amalia's defeat. The most notable are a cutscene that takes place between an older gentleman named Master Willem and an unseen but younger sounding person named Lawrence. This scene is a kind of breakup. Lawrence is leaving and Willem is accusing him of betraying him. He tells Lawrence to fear the old blood, but seems resigned to the fact that he won't. Given what special blood has done to this whole city, I'd say Master Willem was a very wise man indeed. This little phrase is also the password we need to get access to the Forbidden Forest, and eventually reach the Bergenworth College. The second important thing that happens is we receive the eye of a blood-drunk hunter, or rather, you do if you have the Old Hunters DLC. What we learn in the DLC will make much more sense when we have a fuller picture of what the hell has happened here in Yharnam. But we've been learning a lot on our journey already, and the more the hunter sees, the more their insight level increases, leaving one to wonder, what the hell does this thing actually do? Stepping outside will reveal that the night has progressed. Up to this point, we've been caught in a kind of perpetual sunset, with the sky ablaze with fire, and with the way this strange dream of a city of monsters just seems to go around and around until we get something right. The fact that anything has changed at all is a sign that maybe things are getting better? Maybe Gehrman was right after all. Maybe we just need to slay a few beasts and somehow all of this will resolve itself, and we'll be able to wake up at the dawn of a new day. Wouldn't it be nice to just forget all of this? So let's use this password. Excuse me, sir? Hello? Sleeping on the job, can you believe it? While this may not be the first time we've stepped beyond the walls of Yharnam, depending on how we've approached this game, it is the first time on the critical path that we ventured this way, and there is something a little disappointing about this. Hold on, let me finish. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just that every fantasy RPG has a spooky forest of one kind or another, but a vast city of baroque architecture? Those are hard to come by. I look across the city of Yharnam, and I see a world full of mysteries and countless stories to uncover. I arrive in a dark, spooky forest, and yeah, there's gonna be stories here to find, sure. But like, I've done this before in other games, even other Souls games. This is definitely a me problem though. The environments are still dense and cluttered, winding and full of danger and intrigue, and the game just isn't done surprising us yet. The visual style of this game is just jaw-dropping. I've heard plenty of cries on the internet for Bloodborne to get a remake similar to what Demon's Souls received, but come on guys. Does it really need that? Does this look dated at all to anyone? What you want is a 60 FPS port with maybe a slight texture bump to accommodate current generation consoles. Throw in a boss rush and a photo mode and we're Gucci. I can sort of imagine what it must have been like for people playing on their PS4s, stepping through those gates for the first time and looking out over central Yharnam. It's a moment on par with stepping out of the Imperial Dungeon in Oblivion or Vault 101 in Fallout 3 and just staring out. Just a real holy shit moment. As well as greater polygon density and texture resolution for 3D assets, the 8th generation of consoles introduced PBR, or physically based rendering. The previous generations had brought in normal mapping to help fake depth on a model that wasn't actually there, but the only other thing that could be controlled was whether the model was glossy or not. Physically based rendering does its very best to simulate real light in a virtual space and have it interact with materials that contain a lot more data. Here's an example using Blender's principled shader. You can find something very similar in Unreal and just about every other modern 3D graphics engine. We have a color node that receives raw color data, sometimes multiplied with ambient occlusion to create a permanent area of shade. We then have a metal node. Metal is generally a setting of 0 or 1, which is to say something either is or isn't metal. But a black and white texture can be used to indicate that certain parts of a model are metal, while others aren't. Next, we deal with how rough or smooth the object is with another grayscale texture, before adding extra depth with a normal map, and bada bing bada boom. Artists will still get creative with things. For example, they'll highlight edges and darken crevices to help the shape of something to really pop. But once you've got this plugged into your object, the rest is just lighting and post-processing to create your mood. So we not only have this absolutely stunning world space to explore, with everything from the baroque city of Yharnam and the decadent castle Cainhurst, dark foreboding forests, and even a nightmare world or two to explore by the end. We also have quite possibly some of the drippiest drip that ever dripped into a video game. I've actually done personal fan art projects for both Bloodborne's Hunter outfit and Dark Souls 3's Fallen Knight armor. I've tried a couple of times to get them working in Skyrim, but once it's time to tweak all the little bugs out of them, my heart just isn't in it anymore. I examined the original 3D models for both these outfits as part of my study, and the level of detail in these things is just amazing. There are layers and layers of things hidden away in these outfits that you might never see. I suppose it's possible that some of the base layers are used in other outfits, and then just covered up by coats in these ones, but it's pretty damn amazing nonetheless. Generally speaking, we used to operate under the rule that if the player was never going to see it, it shouldn't be there. Otherwise you're just wasting system resources. So it says a lot about the jump up we got in this generation that the developers were fine with all the extra hidden details. The outfits are not entirely without function. Certainly they have a base resistance to damage, but mostly they're about resistances. Like any RPG, Bloodborne has plenty of nasty statuses that can make getting your job done quite difficult. They don't have a curse status that lingers after your death, thankfully, but there is fire and electricity damage to worry about, both slow and fast poisoning, and a frenzy status that will take a big chunk of your health when it fills up. These god-awful Winter Lantern enemies can fill that meter up really quickly. The various outfit sets that you can come across have different resistances to different damage types and status effects. As such, a smart player might keep an eye on these things and switch out their drip depending on the enemies they're up against. Not me though. I just want to look as cool as possible while I do my job. I was really taken with the iconic Hunters set at first, but over time it was the Crow Hunters set, aside from the mask anyway, that stole my attention. I'm just a sucker for anything that makes me think Batman. You might think that a forest that is forbidden wouldn't be inhabited. But remember, it's only forbidden for people from Yharnam to go there. The rules say nothing about people who are already there. Okay, yeah, these are just recolored versions of the Yharnamites, but come on guys. This is a game, resources are limited, And it's not like these guys are completely incapable of getting into Yharnam if they really want to go shopping. So the corruption clearly isn't just confined to Yharnam. Since we're heading towards Bergenworth College, it's entirely possible that whatever has happened here had its origins there. Or more likely, this place is smack in the middle of what was happening in both areas and got hit with an overlap. Here's a Venn diagram, because Venn diagrams are cool, and kinda look like boobies if you squint. At first, our enemies and dogs look much the same as they do in Yharnam, just wearing last season's fashions. But there are two distinct roads forward from here. The first is a somewhat hidden route that brings us into pools of poisonous bog fluid that's patrolled by seemingly abandoned church giants. Maybe they were kept here to keep the inhabitants of the forest out of the city. This route is going to bring you all the way back around to Yosefka's clinic, so maybe that's how they were getting church blood down here. But we are not quite ready for what's in there yet. Hopefully, you were all smart enough to see the earlier red flags and didn't send anyone there. The other way takes us through this windmill and down into a much deeper and more dangerous area of the forest, one that is populated by parasitic snakes that use the very people of the forests as hosts. At this windmill, we actually meet one last survivor. One last soul that we can save from this nightmare. Well, it might seem that way, but to anyone with a pair of eyes, or who has been listening carefully to the warnings of some of the people in the chapel,
I'll spare you one nugget of advice. Beware the blind man.
It's hard to tell from a distance if this wretch is just rifling through these bodies, or if he's actually eating them. But sending him to the chapel is one way for things to go very bad there. Why? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, this guy is actually...
Have you got a screw loose? Or is it your animal intuition? You hunters have got more blood on your hands.
Sending him to the chapel will lead to everyone there being picked off by him, which would be a real downer for our sweet and caring chapel dweller. I mean, just listen to how grateful this guy is to be helpful.
I've never been any use to anyone, you see. Just happy about it, is all. When the night of the hunt passes, suppose we could be friends? Maybe?
Yes, bro, we absolutely can be friends. Best friends, in fact. So no, murder this monster, or send him to the clinic so it can butt heads with whatever is pretending to be Yosefka there, and give those people in the chapel a chance to see the night through. As someone who started with Dark Souls 3, where the world is more spread out and fast travel between bonfires is available from the very beginning, it sort of blew my mind to see just how much more limited checkpoints were in both the first game and in Bloodborne. I'd say in Dark Souls 1, they were actually too conservative with them overall, and that fast travel should have been available from the outset. There's just too much dead time running back to places. I've heard talk in forums, so take this with a grain of salt, that fast travel was never originally intended to be in the game, and it was only hacked in later when the release deadline was closing in, and they just needed to tie up the game and get it shipped. Certainly, those later areas and some of the bosses in Dark Souls 1 have this slapdash that'll do kind of feel to them, making it something of a flawed masterpiece, but they really nail it in Bloodborne. I'm still very much in the camp that there should be a checkpoint outside the fog gate, and I've yet to play a single one of these games that has demonstrated any benefit to making me rerun several rooms and dodge several enemies before I actually get back to my boss fight. But for overall exploration of a level up to that point, I am very impressed with how hard they are able to milk a single checkpoint in this one. This is generally done through a kind of double or even triple shortcut system. Once you find your first shortcut, in this case it's a gate, you'll probably notice another elevator or door very close to this one that's going to help you link up back here and reduce your overall travel time and combat encounters before you can continue progressing through an area. If you thought things in this area were bad enough with the snakes everywhere, there is this odd little side route that's inhabited by... Guys? Guys? What am I looking at here? Once we finally crack this particular madhouse though, we enter into a boss fight called the Shadow of Yharnam. It's basically a fight with 3 hooded figures who gain more abilities, including snake ones, as you pick them off. Generally, I'm not a fan of boss fights where ads spawn in to distract you from the boss so it can get off free hits at you, and we will certainly be complaining about that very shortly. But I was kinda into juggling these guys around, blocking them with the scenery, and getting off my shots and visceral attacks at them. I was just a little disappointed when they showed up as regular enemies later. Now, to be clear, I wasn't there for the developer meetings. I have no idea why this choice was made. I'm just talking personal feelings and vibes here. And certainly, in a lot of old school beat 'em up games, it was normal for early game bosses to reappear later, mixed in with regular enemy packs. But yeah, I'm not gonna say lazy, but I'm thinking it really hard here. If you disagree, tell me in the comments. I don't like being harsh on developers when I know just how hard it is to make a damn game. So I'd love to have another point of view to consider on this one. The final approach to Byrgenwerth College sees the hunter coming up against not educated men and women, but creatures with a lot of eyes. And then there's this weird thing we only see inside the Chalice dungeons. All of this, though, is leading us into this relatively small building full of books and study apparatus, to eventually step out onto this lunarium, where we find... Well, this is unexpected. Are you still alive, sir? Would you perhaps like to share what became of all the students and scholars who supposedly worked here? No? You're just gonna point at the water, huh? You really want me to go in there, don't you? Okay, let's get this over with. The other half of any Souls game is spectacular battles with oversized bosses that can destroy you in just a few hits. I feel like these things, much more so than the general exploration, are what really give the Souls games their reputation. While I personally love creeping through all these tightly wound and interconnected environments, and make it a point of pride to murder everything between myself and my next shortcut, you really can just sprint past most of these enemies if you know where you're going. Bosses though, well, short of using exploits and glitches to bypass them, you're gonna have to put up with their bullshit until you can figure out how to defeat them. In short, you're gonna have to get good. This is the part of the game that I would argue is overly glazed, with its many flaws overlooked. I hear that bosses are hard in order to create this massive sense of achievement at the end of climbing the mountain, except that there's such a thing as a bitter victory. You can feel some relief at overcoming a powerful enemy for sure, but this promised sense of gratification can often be soured by just how long you've been forced to replay the same loop over and over, by how many evenings of your limited free time were lost to this one pointless task, and the sunk cost fallacy that prevented you from just putting the controller down and saying, fuck it, there's no way this could possibly be worth it. So while I've had more than a few screams of victory upon defeating certain enemies, I've also found myself throwing the controller down and closing out of the game after defeating a boss because how dare this game think it was okay to make me go through that? I came back, yeah, but I wouldn't call that a healthy relationship with the media. I also stumbled into this one reel a while back where some guy was overly glazing these bosses, saying that they teach you accountability too. That at some point you have to stop saying that the boss is unfair or badly designed and start owning your failures. But again, this only applies to a percentage of the bosses in all of these games. Quite a few of them are rushed, broken pieces of ass. In the end, a studio only has so much money to spend on its game, and it has to decide where to spend that money for maximum effectiveness. So the likes of Father Gascoigne and the final boss are really amazing battles that make you use all the tricks and strategies the game has been teaching you how to use for the entire playtime. But then you've got utter garbage like Rom, the Celestial Emissary, and the Living Failures that just use ads to draw your attention and give the main boss free attacks on you. And giants like Amygdala, who can basically be rendered harmless by just running close enough to them. I mean, how did they not notice that in playtesting? Did all the testers just main firearms for the entire playthrough? The only thing these enemies have going for them is their massive damage output, meaning they only have to clip you a couple of times at best and you're going all the way back to the beginning. And that is absolutely cheap. There are other enemies where the win feels like pure RNG too. Boss attacks are just a relatively short list of animations that are chosen based on certain conditions like the player's distance from the boss and some random number generation. Vicar Amalia, for example, can heal herself during the fight. This only serves to extend the battle and create more opportunities for you to mess up a dodge and get hit by one of her devastating attacks. The time when I won against her, she just didn't use it, so I didn't even need to perform all that well to get through her. There's another boss later, who I'm holding off on showing until we hit the full spoiler section, but she has a rush attack that would always clip me, even if I used multiple backsteps to escape it. Even now, I have not figured out how to evade this move, and if she uses it multiple times, one after the other, which she can do, she can quickly wipe me out. Both times that I beat her, she only did that move once for reasons I have no control over. My point is, there's plenty wrong with this part of the game, and you absolutely can accuse some of these bosses of being cheap, broken, and unworthy of the time they demand from you to get past them. That doesn't mean there aren't really great ones. It can be an absolute pleasure to take on some of these mountains, learn their patterns, and incrementally, little by little, push closer and closer to victory against them, until you reach a point where they just don't have anything left to surprise you with, and you can just dog walk them right into their defeat. Fromsoftware have definitely gotten better at this with their subsequent games, and I'd even argue that their DLC bosses are generally better than their base game ones. Sekiro, for example, has some absolutely amazing boss fights, and a lot more great than bad. I'm not sure about Elden Ring yet though. Considering how many bosses would be needed to inhabit a full open world, there's just no way there aren't some truly unworthy combatants to take on there. But I'm excited about finding out when I finally free up some time. You can soften this blow by using summoning bells. You can spend insight to summon either old hunters to your aid, or, if you're playing online, enlist the help of other people playing the game to take on a specific enemy. And this is absolutely 100% a valid tactic. It is an in-game mechanic, and overcoming challenges together is part of the Souls experience. You've also got items like fire and bolt paper to buff your damage and help you get the boss's health down quicker, to reduce the chances that you'll screw up and eat a devastating one-shot attack. Bosses in Bloodborne also have location damage. A lot of bigger enemies in Dark Souls had tails that could be cut off, but Bloodborne went a step further and introduced location damage and breaking to help stun enemies and open them up to visceral attacks. So anyway, ROM is S tier. It's not that hard, especially if you bring a friend to share the heat, but it's not a well-crafted battle that is going to teach you accountability or grant you this great sense of achievement at overcoming it. You'll just be glad this BS is all finished with for now, but that's about it. And on a replay, you might even put down the controller and think, yeah, that's enough for now. I don't need to do this crap again. Time for me to pick up a mid-priced AA disco-like to play. So with ROM defeated, things really take a turn down a much darker path as a blood-red moon fills the sky, and we see a strange figure standing alone in the lake. So we've been piecing this narrative together from scraps of information here and there, and I guess you could say we've had light spoilers up until now. But this is the point of no return right here. So if you haven't played this one, and somehow don't know what lurks beneath the surface of Yharnam's troubles, well, I advise you to click off the video and go play this for yourself first. It's quite the revelation to say the least. For the rest of us, it's finally time to pull back the veil and see what's really pulling the strings of all this madness. The cosmic or eldritch horror genre has its origins with American horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. It's a subgenre of horror that focuses on the unknown and the unknowable. His most iconic creation, Great Cthulhu, a tentacle-faced bat-winged monstrosity that sleeps within the depths of the earth, awaiting its moment to awaken to dominate or devour all life on this planet, has become something of a household brand at this point. While it once existed as a figure of terror within a couple of relatively unknown short stories, and a pen and paper role-playing game based on the larger Lovecraft mythology, it now exists in the form of everything from a video game boss to a plushie that kids can cuddle in their bed at night. Whatever horrors were conjured in the mind of this, relatively unknown for his time, man from Rhode Island, I doubt even he could have envisioned modern-day consumerism. The fulcrum of most of these stories is the discovery by the protagonist of their own utter insignificance in the universe, and a slow descent into madness as a result of this knowledge. It's a philosophical view somewhat similar to nihilism. Through the discovery of powers within the universe that are so vast and incomprehensible, the protagonist has to come to terms with the idea that they are absolutely powerless to change anything in the face of these near godlike cosmic beings. This reflects somewhat the complete indifference of the universe to the people working away on this tiny rock in, as Douglas Adams puts it, the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy. As much as some want to insist that we are special, loved, and put here for some reason by some greater force, with our best interests at heart, there simply isn't any evidence to back up that claim. There's a lot of belief and faith for sure, and that's fine providing you aren't shoving it down anyone else's throat. But hard evidence that can be tested and verified? Not a shred. On the other hand, even now we can look at the universe and find more and more massive forces of utter destruction. Black holes that could swallow our entire solar system many times over, that have existed for time beyond our comprehension. And here we are, these tiny fleeting events walking around like literally anything we do matters, and imagining we'll somehow be around forever. For an atheist like myself and Mr. Lovecraft, this would be a great starting point for a very bleak outlook on the place of people within the universe. For a man who lived through World War I and the Great Depression, it could certainly take them to very dark and terrifying places. Bloodborne isn't an adaptation of a Lovecraft story of any kind, but it does draw a lot of inspiration from them. Specifically, the idea of cosmic forces of unimaginable power, pulling the strings of the very reality we perceive from behind the shadows. Or, as we find out when we enter the Yahar'gul unseen village, right under our noses. Well, this is different. So where did these beasties come from? Short answer? They were always here. They always have been. Remember this little ticker up in the corner here? This little insight eye that jumps up a notch every time you enter a new area, lay eyes upon some new horror in a boss arena, or sample some of that madman's knowledge we find littered around the map. Notice how the symbol is an eye, like it implies seeing something? Remember how the doll sprung to life when we first sampled some of that knowledge? I mean, did she spring to life? Or was she always staring back at us, wondering why we couldn't see her doing just that? How about these witches at the end of Hemwick Charnel Lane? They could summon these weird enemies to attack us and distract us from them. We even bumped into them around the map. Unless we spent all of our insight. If we reduced it to nothing, they just vanished. Our eyes have finally been opened, and it's starting to become clear that what the Healing Church wants has very little to do with helping people, and everything to do with serving powerful and ancient beings whose designs are almost completely beyond us ever understanding. Almost, but not entirely. In our journey, we can encounter items, people, and even square off against a few of these great ones ourselves, and in doing so, piece together a much more coherent picture of what's really happening in Yharnam. The only issue is, once you understand it all, you might want to wish all of those memories away. Okay, it's about time to return all the way back to the beginning and explore Yosefka's clinic. Back when we visited the Hunter's workshop, we may have found a strange little item called a 1/3 umbilical cord. These are exceptionally rare items in the game. A total of 4 of them exist, and their purpose is shrouded in mystery. The one we find in the workshop reads, "Every great one loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. The 3rd umbilical cord precipitated the encounter with the pale moon, which beckoned the hunters and conceived the hunter's dream. Surrogate? By all that is sacred. Is that what these things are doing here? Is that why beings of this magnitude have an interest in frail mortal things like us? And what's this about a pale moon? Is that linked to pale blood? And is the hunter's dream connected to one of these things? Is that why I keep dying and coming back? If so, what the hell does this thing want from me? Taking the back door into Yharnam from the Forbidden Forest and back into Yosefka's clinic confirms something we've long suspected. Yosefka hasn't been on the other side of the door for a very long time, and anyone who was unfortunate enough to be sent here along the way has also been transformed into one of these violations of the natural order. When we find Yosefka, we discover she's...
Don't you see how they writhe inside my head? It's rather rapturous.
By the tears of Andraste, by the beard of Gwyn, woman, what has been done to you? Ending Yosefka's suffering grants us another third umbilical cord. This one reads, Provost Willem sought the cord in order to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a great one, by lining his brain with eyes, the only choice he knew if man were ever to match their greatness. Lining your brain with eyes? Like, insight? Is this a metaphor or something literal? So, is that what these people were doing? They were trying to become great ones themselves? Is that what the Healing Church is trying to do? No, hey, what's this invitation doing here? Wait, how do these people even know I'm here? I had no idea I was going to be here. Cainhurst Castle? How? Still, this is mighty close to where I woke up. Maybe I brought this here? We can see the Forbidden Castle far in the horizon if we venture along Hemwick Charnel Lane and deal with the utterly maddened inhabitants we encounter there. More minds broken by this wretched blood that I keep pumping into myself every time I take damage. If these people weren't so desperate to end my life every time they laid eyes upon me, I might actually mourn for them. What an utter tragedy this is. Approaching this place, invitation in hand, will lead to an ominous encounter, for sure. There's something very liminal about your first arrival at Castle Cainhurst. Similar to the Painted World in Dark Souls, it's so far removed from the central locations that are also interwoven that it almost feels like you've fallen through a collision wall and into an unused level that was supposed to have been cut from the final release. The blood moon that can be seen all across Yharnam doesn't cast any light here, and the land is frozen and trapped in time. Looking back the way we came, the bridge has been destroyed. So how the hell we got here at all is another mystery. What we know of this place and its former inhabitants from Alfred is that the Vilebloods, as he calls them, took the secrets of the Healing Church for themselves, and it transformed them into abominations and something akin to vampires. Prior to this, they were the nobility who held sway over this area, but the rise of the Healing Church eroded their power and set them as rivals. So when the Church learnt of their use of the blood, they declared it an abomination and sent executioners to murder the inhabitants of the castle down to its last woman and child. This crusade was led by a holy knight named Logarius, and he himself stayed behind to keep a vigil over the place after the bridge was destroyed and the castle cut off forever. The first enemies we encounter here are bloated, mosquito-like things that glut themselves on blood. We occasionally find them in the Chalice dungeons too, but it's certainly fitting to find blood-drinking parasites here in a castle once thought to have been inhabited by vampires. Inside, however, we see the real fruits of the Healing Church's labour. Much like everywhere else we visit, we find these wretched servant creatures acting out a parody of a life they once led, seemingly unaware of how much they've been transformed by the blood they crave. They, for the most part at least, will actually leave us alone if we don't bother them. However, should we decide to take anything from this place, that's when we'll be assaulted by not only them, but by something far more sinister. Seemingly hundreds of wraiths inhabit this cursed place. They are all female, and they are all lost and sobbing things, some of whom carry their severed heads in their arms as they stumble blindly around these forgotten halls. At this point we understand that there is nothing holy or righteous about the Healing Church, but to see so many who had their lives violently stamped out by the Church's executioners in one place really sheds a light on the depth of their corruption. The castle is quite the winding ascent to its tower and roofs, but at the very top, surrounded by a great blizzard, we find a towering husk of a man resting in a chair. This powerful entity stirs upon our arrival and slowly drags itself to its feet to prepare for battle. This is the man Alfred reveres, his martyr Logarius, the one who stayed behind to keep an eternal vigil over this place. I won't say he's alive and well, but he's certainly moving and capable of doing some serious damage when he wants to. Martyr Logarius is a pretty good battle overall, and his defeat grants us access to the crown that sits atop his head, named the Crown of Illusions. Placing it on parts the veil once again, and reveals to us exactly what the old martyr was guarding this whole time. Within these halls we can find Annalise, the immortal queen of the Vile Bloods. She's still very much alive, and a damn sight more coherent than Logarius or the majority of people we've met on our journey. She gleefully declares that she is in fact the queen of the Vile Bloods, and a sworn enemy of the Healing Church. Whether she always held this view of herself, or whether her hatred at her imprisonment has led her to embracing the name they used to demonize her, none can say. We can, however, drink her blood and join the Vile Blood Covenant should we choose. And we can also find one more invitation not far from her throne. Only this one is not addressed to us or anyone else. I wonder who actually wrote that one. We can hand this invitation over to Alfred, and our sweet and well-mannered knight will set off with all haste to answer his righteous calling. And we can find him again in the castle, in the Queen's very throne room.
All mangled and twisted, with every inside on the outside for all the world to see.
By Azura, old boy, what have you done? Have you too become maddened by blood and murder? Or is this who you always were? I suppose I can't judge. A flood could drown the whole world, and there still wouldn't be enough water to wipe all the blood from my hands at this point. While Alfred admires his handiwork, we can pocket some of the Queen's still twitching remains. She is, supposedly, truly immortal after all, and this world still has secrets to impart to us. Alfred's journey ends much like the journeys of every other Souls NPC. We find him where we met him all that time ago, slumped and dead over the altar he was praying at. He is largely believed to have violated the YouTube community guidelines so that he might be martyred himself. But by who? There's no one left to correct the records on Logarius, or to carve Alfred's name into his tombstone. There isn't even anyone to bury him, only beasts that will find and devour his corpse. There are no happy endings here, no glorious last stands, no statues to inspire or songs to be sung, just corruption, rot, and waste. There is one more thing of note that we can find in the castle though. It's a rather fetching, noble dress. The description of this one reads, "A finely tailored Bordeaux dress, worn by the nobles of the old bloodline that traces back to the forsaken Castle Cainhurst." Huh. Have we maybe seen someone wearing one of these before? Since we know the folly of sending anyone to Iosefka's clinic, hopefully we've managed to gather a small group of survivors together in the chapel under the care of the Dweller and his incense. As already mentioned, there are several ways things can go bad for this little crew, one of them being allowing this monster to hide among them. Assuming that doesn't happen, you can actually ask both Ariana, a Lady of the Night, and Adela to provide you with special blood vials to use in a pinch. These not only provide a shot of healing like regular vials do, but will also grant another temporary buff to keep you in the fight longer. Since I've been playing RPGs forever, I kept these in supply for some bigger problem that would come up later, and wound up finishing the game and never using them. Now remember that to Adela, the hunter is a saint that she prayed for to deliver her from a terrible darkness, and she does not like seeing them interact with or take blood from a woman like Ariana. In fact, she will actually kill Ariana and even try to kill the player if she sees them do it 4 times, claiming their blood is now tainted. I think it's easy to see how a nun could consider the blood of a woman with Ariana's profession tainted, but there's also the dress that she wears to consider. So what, you might say? It's just a dress. Who cares if it looks like a Cainhurst dress? That doesn't prove anything. Any good seamstress can make a dress that looks like another dress, and anyone with enough money can buy one. And usually, I'd agree. But this is a game with a mystery to uncover, and outfits are one of the ways the developers leave hints for us. As the night progresses, not only does Adela seem to slip away into some kind of madness, but Ariana starts to feel terrible pains inside her. And towards the end of the game, we find her down in the church basement, having given birth to... By all gods, kill it with fire. This creature yields yet another third umbilical cord. This one reading, "Every great one loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. And Oedon, the formless great one, is no different. To think it was corrupted blood that began this eldritch liaison." Well, that more or less confirms Ariana's Cainhurst heritage, but this is utterly reprehensible. One of the first people we can recruit into this unlikely family is a lady known only as the Lonely Old Woman. She's not exactly a ray of sunshine to be around, at least not at first, anyway. Later in the game, she seems to have quite the personality transformation, and comes across as a little drunk, to put it mildly. She can eventually be coaxed into sharing sedatives with the hunter. These are useful for dealing with the frenzy status. You need to be careful how many you take from her though, because if you take too many, she'll rush out into the city to find more, and meet a grisly end of her own. Speaking of grisly ends, I wonder what happened to Gilbert. Well, Fromsoftware didn't forget about him either. While there's little incentive to return to his window once we've reached the cathedral ward, a curious player who stumbles back that way will eventually find it broken and the area patrolled by one of the beasts we meet in Old Yharnam. The poor guy really was beyond saving. So that just leaves Eileen then. I wish I could tell you that there's a good ending for at least one of these guys, but that just isn't how we do things in these games, though this one isn't exactly bad. The second phase of Eileen's quest sees us helping her defeat another hunter in the same graveyard that we fought Father Gascoigne in. It's entirely possible for her to die here, either as a natural result of the fight, or from friendly fire. But if you're careful of when and how you get your hits in, you can help guarantee her victory and earn her respect. Though she will offer one small piece of advice.
But try to keep your hands clean. A hunter should hunt beasts. Leave the hunting of hunters to me.
We eventually find her bloodied and dying on the steps of the Grand Cathedral. It would seem her most recent target has proven far too skilled for her to overcome. She insists the player turn back, and to her credit, this guy is a hell of a mountain to climb. I've never beaten him without cheesing his ass, to be honest, but I'll take the wins where I can get them. Eileen ultimately decides she's too old for this life, and it's finally time for her to step down and hand over her mantle. The hunter gains the Crow Hunter badge and can assume the mantle of the Hunter of Hunters if they choose. We don't actually know what becomes of her in the end. After our last conversation, she vanishes, leaving only a bloodstain where she was lying bleeding out. I hope she got as far away as possible from all of this. This place is utter madness and horror. But that about wraps it up for all of our NPCs. So I guess it's finally time to uncover the secrets of the unseen village, and those of the highest ranking orders within the church. That being the choir and the School of Mensis. I guess a recap might be in order at this point. We've been dancing around a lot of information, but we're on the cusp of it all falling into place. So let's just do a quick summary. I'm pretty sure a few of you at the back there were looking at your phones and not taking notes earlier, and I promise you, this is going to be on the test. Yharnam is built atop the ruins of the ancient Pthumerian civilization. These people communed with cosmic beings and gained insight and power. However, these very cosmic beings seem to have been responsible for their eventual collapse and disappearance. We have little clue as to their motives, save that they seek surrogates with which to create their children. The scholars at Byrgenwerth, many centuries later, stumbled into the ancient subterranean labyrinths and found not only the transformed Pthumerians still wandering around these silent halls, but also information on the Great Ones and their remarkable old blood. As they studied these wonders, they began to imagine that they might be able to elevate themselves, and possibly all of humanity, to the level of the Great Ones. However, a great divide emerged within the college. Master Willem felt that the blood was a thing to be feared, and that the path to greatness lay through insight, or lining the brain with eyes. His student Lawrence, however, had other plans, and used it to found the Healing Church. Through the wonders of his blood ministration, Lawrence and his church rose to become even more wealthy and powerful than the nobles of Castle Cainhurst, and once he discovered that they had their own version of the healing blood, he used that as an opportunity to wipe out powerful political enemies and seal the new status quo where the Healing Church was the absolute power in Yharnam and answerable to no one. From then on, he had an entire city to use as subjects for his experiments with the old blood, and as the fame of the Healing Church grew, so did its wealth and influence, and in turn, so did the city of Yharnam. The blood, however, slowly but surely, began transforming people into raging beasts that terrorized the streets. This led to the first hunter Gehrman, and then later, a church paladin named Ludwig, to begin a great hunt to purge these beasts. The church knew, all too soon, that the beasts were actually being created by the old blood. After all, this is what became of Lawrence. Yeah, pretty. And Ludwig didn't exactly turn out much better either. The people were kept in the dark as to this little fact, so that the church could maintain its status and power, and continue their experiments into the elevation of humanity. They were recruited into the nightly hunts, and took fire, blade, and righteous fury to the beasts, without ever knowing they were once their friends and neighbours, and it might only be a matter of nights before they were the ones on the receiving end of it all. Our hunter awakened into a Yharnam that has gone far past the breaking point. The people out in the streets are now all half-mad beasts themselves, almost like some powerful force has accelerated the entire process. We found a great one named Rom inside a lake at Byrgenwerth College, and when we slew her, the veil parted, revealing terrifying eldritch horrors watching over the city, pulling the strings of all this madness from behind the veil, and now fully exposed and willing to strike out at us. If we've been paying attention, we've also come to learn about the different factions within the church. The choir, who inhabit the upper cathedral ward, and the school of Mensis, who run the jail we found ourselves in not so long ago. What we may not realise is that while these are two parts of the same church, they are rivals with different agendas. Descending into the unseen village, we can eventually find the key to the upper cathedral ward. We found the door very early on, and since this is an optional area to explore, we'll go up before we go down. The majority of this area is taken up with the orphanage. The key to this place reads, "Key to the orphanage, birthplace of the choir. The orphanage, shadowed by the Grand Cathedral, was a place of scholarship and experimentation, where young orphans became potent, unseen thinkers for the Healing Church. The choir that would later split the Healing Church was a creation of the orphanage." I mean, with everything else they've done, brainwashing children seems almost quaint by comparison. That part about experimentation, though, that raises eyebrows. What kind of experimentation? Did all of these orphans become the choir? Well, probably not. Because in the Lumen Flower Garden, above the Grand Cathedral, we find one of the choir's dirty little secrets. The Celestial Emissary is an absolutely garbage tier boss fight. Similar to ROM, it doesn't have any particularly difficult attacks to deal with. It just has a lot of ads that can get free pot shots off at you. Honestly, crap like this almost has me reaching for the infinite health cheat you can use on the PC. If you guys can't be bothered to make this worth my time and energy, I see no reason to give you any. The creation of this monstrosity is something we will stumble into later, but the emissary is an actual great one, a person transformed through experiments and insight into a true cosmic being. Which sounds cool, but given how much the fight sucks, I'm starting to wonder what the benefit of transcendence even is. You know how like in Resident Evil games, Umbrella is making more and more elaborate ultimate weapons for war, and then those weapons just get taken out by regular guns, or in some cases a knife. Yeah, like, I don't know, just make guns, guys. I'm getting the same vibe here. But even this isn't the choir's true secret. Oh no. Once we defeat this thing, we're able to enter the upper levels of the cathedral, where we find an elevator. An elevator that takes us down into the depths of the earth, where we find the true altar of this cathedral, and the one who worships there. This is Ebritus, daughter of the cosmos, and it is she whom the Healing Church worships. She is a true Great One. She was left behind when the others transcended this reality. She communes with them and acts as a conduit between their unknowable minds and those of the Healing Church. She guides the church in blood ministration, which really makes her the source of this madness, and she prays at the altar of despair. She's something of a super boss, an optional mountain to climb. Her head is very vulnerable to damage, but getting her to bring it into striking distance is a bit of a cat and mouse game, as her rush attack is all but unavoidable and does broken levels of damage. Her arm strikes are followed immediately by her tentacles that have massive range, meaning you have to exploit your iframes to dodge through them rather than shrumping away from them. She is by no means a top tier boss, but her design, look, and the location of this battle does stick out in my mind. I actually waited until I had a level 10 weapon before I took her on this time, and was somewhat overpowered for the fight. Defeating her gives us access to the altar, where we can, if we want to, revive the Vile Blood Queen, Annalise. Sorry, Alfred. As we descend through Yahar'gul, there is a sense that we are closing in on something final, something important. The sky is now blood red with the light of the moon. Lovecraftian horrors hang from the towers and actively participate in obstructing our progress, and equally as strange is the arrival of chime maidens in the city. We find these creatures in the Chalice dungeons. They can summon the spirits of the Pthumerians to come forth as a kind of blood wraith. And if they're left to their own devices, they can become a real problem for the hunter. But somehow, they're now here above the surface, the original servants of the Old Ones, now puppeteering the very spirits of the Yharnam people. Descending through this madness, we can eventually return to our lantern in the Hypogean jail. We've made it all the way back here at last. Only the lantern is now... That's not supposed to happen. This is a real Sadako Doki Doki Literature Club moment. While it's never explicitly said that the NPCs can't see or interact with the lamps, it's sort of implied that they are off limits. They exist more as game mechanics than as a feature of the world. Occasionally, a powerful enemy will spawn near one and render it inactive until it's defeated, but they aren't supposed to be able to do that. So, are any of them safe now? Are enemies going to start showing up in the hunter's dream next? There are actually 3 hunters waiting to ambush you here. The bagmen both here and all over the rest of Yharnam have all been slain. You aren't going to be able to kill one of these guys with a single visceral either, meaning you're going to have to juggle all 3 of them at some point. Hunters stay dead when they die though, so it's entirely possible to whittle down their threat before rushing back to a lamp to recover and restock your supplies. Out in the street though, things have only gotten worse. The creatures that roam the streets now are massive piles of corpses, all smashed together and animated by some unknown power. We see people fused into the walls of the buildings, trapped in the moment of their violent demise, as if something powerful erupted through here in an instant and transformed these places into stone cemeteries. All around, the Chime Maidens call their spirits, and we edge closer and closer to a wide square called Advent Plaza, where we see the full extent of their power as they use their chimes together in a dark ritual that opens a gateway into the eternal cosmos and allows something to fall through. Whether this is a true great one, a shell to be possessed by one, or just another failed attempt at elevating someone to their level, we can't really say. All we know is that this thing is called the One Reborn, and it now stands between us and the doors of the chapel that hold the Scholars of Mensis, who are no doubt responsible for this entire nightmare. The only real gimmick to this fight is the Chime Maidens standing above the arena, who heal the beast when its health gets low enough. These can be dispatched fairly quickly, at which point the boss isn't all that challenging. It's a great spectacle, and has a few devastating attacks, but it has some pretty big blind spots that can be exploited for an easy kill if you know what you're doing. And so we ascend the steps into the halls of Mensis, where we can finally challenge them and hold them accountable for all this madness, and... of course, they've all been dead for a really long time. Why wouldn't they be? And while we seem to have run out of roads to move down at this point, there is still one more world to traverse, one more mountain to climb, one more challenge to overcome. Approaching the mummy that acts as the focal point here will send us beyond this world into... Not exactly what I was expecting, if I'm being honest. This lecture hall may have once been part of Byrgenwerth. It's hard to say, but it's quite clear that whoever studied here in the past has long since succumbed to the same mutations and degeneration as everyone else who comes into contact with the Blood or the Great Ones. But honestly, this isn't the first time we've been here. Oh no, not at all. Since Patches is something of a long-running FromSoft character, he gets his own small chapter in the video. While there is a nameless trickster in the 2003 FromSoft first-person ARPG Tower Abyss, a character called Patches doesn't actually turn up until the 2008 game Armored Core for Answer. Here, he's a sniper who will plead for mercy when defeated. From then on, he started showing up in Souls games with the primary mission of booting the player into one hole or another. I guess he skipped showing up in Sekiro because gravity isn't really a problem for Okami. While he insists on making a nuisance of himself in these games, he will plead for mercy and, if spared, become available as a merchant, and that's no different here. My first encounter with Patches in my first playthrough actually happened at this house in the Forbidden Forest. But when the time is right, he'll jump into the shoes of any NPC who can be spoken to, and thus, he showed up at Gilbert's window in this playthrough. He gives the player a tonsil stone and tells them where they can take it to gain great rewards. This doesn't turn out to be entirely true, unfortunately.
Oh, Amidala, have mercy on the poor bastard.
But that's how we can wind up in this lecture hall, dealing with these mutated undergrads for the first time. It's a kind of staging ground between two worlds. Patches is even hanging out, goading you forward to deal with whatever trap he's sucked you into. Opening the doors at the end of the hall reveals the portal that takes us to the Nightmare Frontier. The nightmare part of this is actually quite literal. This isn't a physical space so much as it is an actual nightmare. Something constructed from some kind of collective unconsciousness and populated with things I'd rather not deal with. This is also the swamp level, because again, it's a Souls game, and apparently we can't have one of these without having to wade through a swamp that inflicts constant poison damage on us, slows our movement, and hamstrings our mobility. I don't like these things in any game, to be honest, not just Souls games. I generally think it's a pretty cheap way to add difficulty to an area, and just frustrating to move through. That being said, I've suffered through enough of these that I'm just past complaining about them. so be it. The abundance of blood vials in this game does make it easier to navigate this swamp than some of the others, and at this point, you've probably realized that blood echoes are pretty cheap. I probably should have brought this up in the combat section, but dying will lead you to lose your blood echoes. They will be left on the floor where you fell, and act as a temptation for you to make the same mistakes again. In Bloodborne, your echoes can be picked up by an enemy, meaning you'll have to slay them to get them back. But honestly, this is kind of a clever trick that the game plays on you. Blood echoes are not a finite resource. There are blood echoes everywhere. Of course, if you lose a big stack of them, you're going to need to invest some time to get them back. But honestly, it's really not a big deal. You aren't going to wind up underleveled and underpowered just because you didn't level up after a boss fight and quickly got yourself killed afterwards. There is always enough to go around. So when you're wading through a poison swamp, sprinting past enemies because, again, no one told you that you had to fight and kill them all. You just made that little rule up in your head. And you find yourself out of healing and out of luck, don't worry, don't fret. It'll come back to you in the end. We aren't done with Patches yet. He actually has another trap to spring on us as we explore this place. If we follow a trail of shiny coins, we can eventually... God damn it. At the end of this winding road, we come face to face with Amygdala. This is one of the great ones that we've seen on the towers of Yahar'gul, and it's time for a little payback. So, what are we doing here? It seems that Patches worships and offers sacrifices to this particular Amygdala, and that sort of hints at the idea that these great ones aren't some kind of hive mind, that they are individuals with their own followings and motivations, which means it's not entirely impossible that they are beyond coming into conflict with each other. And that's going to be important later. Returning to the lecture hall with the Great One slain, we can finally confront Patches up close and... Bro, what the hell are you? As per his namesake, Patches will beg for mercy and try to weasel his way out of what he's got coming to him for being an ass. We can spare him, and he'll eventually show up in the Chalice dungeons as a merchant. Or not, and we can stomp his disgusting little face into the ground for trying to get us killed. Either way, we eventually have to open the door on the second floor of the lecture hall and step through another portal into the Nightmare of Mensis. It would seem we are finally on the cusp of bringing this night and this nightmare to its ultimate end. Just approaching this castle requires us to move between cover, lest we alert something to our presence and get smashed with bolts of frenzy. We've actually seen attacks of a similar nature coming from the Winter Lantern enemies that only exist within the nightmares, but this seems to be coming from that light up in the castle. We're going to have to do something about that at some point. What's also especially disturbing is all the rock formations that resemble screaming faces and the shapes of those corpse beasts we fought leading up to Advent Plaza. We can break into the castle via a back door, but we're going to be dealing with all of Patch's family in the process, and while running away is an option, there's an agent of the choir up ahead who has his own feelings about your continued breathing. With each success we push higher and higher, as if being called to commune with something at the very top of this keep. Commune, or possibly destroy. Before we can get there though, we've got to deal with the last survivor of Mensis. The mummified figure who was sitting in that chair, his head caged in something like an antenna, is, apparently, the host of this vile place. His name is Mikolash, and just like every other church fanatic, he's engineered all this in a bid to get those elusive eyes on the inside and raise himself up to the level of the Great Ones. It doesn't matter who is sacrificed or how much collateral damage is inflicted along the way. The people merged into the walls of their homes, the bodies piled up in the cages at the hands of his bagmen, the acceleration of the transformation of the people of Yharnam into beasts. None of it matters if he can just touch the cosmos. For this, he sacrificed his own body, but Mikolash has flown too close to the sun, and we are the power responsible for burning away his wings and casting him out of this world. He's very chatty during this absolutely garbage tier battle. I almost wonder if it would have been more forgivable if he hadn't been presented as a boss, and if he hadn't needed so much damage to defeat. We chase Mikuláš through his labyrinth of constantly reanimating skeletons, while he drops hints about Rom, and even something called Kos. Kos of the Cosmos, perhaps? What could he be talking about here? I actually found a way to cheese him and prevent him from getting into the second phase of his fight. You can basically prevent him from entering the room where the second phase takes place, and continue the chase, just getting off potshots at him here and there. This way he never busts out his big guns, and you get to claim a victory with an absolutely shit-eating grin. Don't look at me like that. If they'd wanted me to give a damn about this fight, they wouldn't have made it so bad. His last words as we cast his spirit into the wind is that he's going to wake up and forget everything. That sounds nice. How nice it would be to just open my eyes and have all these horrors and all this knowledge just vanish like a dream. After all, how does anyone, even a hunter of beasts, just get on with their lives when they know what's really pulling the strings of reality just beyond their field of vision? At the very pinnacle of the castle, somewhere we reach after taking care of that frenzy brain. He wasn't that hard. So long, sucker. We are once again met by a breathtaking figure in a white dress that is stained horribly red with the evidence of a birth. This woman is Yharnam, the woman from whom the city is named. She is the Pthumerian queen, and here we see what engineered the downfall of her people. She was a surrogate of a great one. She birthed one of their children, and now we can hear the baby crying just up above us. This is the source of the nightmare. This is what we've come to slay. Up above us is the infant great one, Murgo. It's time for this to end. It's time for all of us to get some rest, I think. But not before we deal with the wet nurse. While I think an observant player could infer much of what we've talked about in the first half of the video just by playing the game, a lot of what we've been discussing in the spoiler section is buried a little more deeply. The main area that we find it is scattered among all the various item descriptions, but even these don't reveal the whole picture. Much of this has been arrived at by consensus. A lot of people in the fandom coming together to share their information and connecting the dots as best they can. This is very much by design. We talked earlier about Miyazaki's experience with books in his life and how he wants his stories to trigger the imagination of people who engage with them rather than simply give them answers to the mystery. In all these games we start with the conclusion and wade backwards through the shattered narrative to try and find some kind of path that brought us all the way here in the first place. We know incredibly little about Murgo or his wet nurse. If you haven't been paying attention, you'll probably have no idea what Mikuláš was doing here, let alone this thing. Murgo and his wet nurse are true great ones. While the fight with the wet nurse isn't all that hot, it ends with the message, "Nightmare slain," rather than "prey slaughtered." This indicates something different has happened. Murgo has fallen silent, and when we leave the arena, even Queen Yharnam fades away to nothing. We do find one more third umbilical cord though, and this one reads, "Every great one loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. This cord granted Mensis audience with Murgo, but resulted in the stillbirth of their brains." So there it is. These strange cords that seem tied to the Great One's ability to breed with mortals. These are the apex artifacts of this whole twisted faith. Mensis tried to commune with Murgo and somehow transcend their limitations to become likened to the Great Ones. The only thing they achieved though was their minds all being destroyed and their bodies left to rot. They brought ruin to the people of the Unseen Village and almost the entire city of Yharnam. So is this the source of this nightmare? Will this night finally end? In a way, yes. Under normal circumstances, Gehrman will be waiting for us in the Hunter's Dream, ready to awaken us. However, what Mensis did isn't the first tragedy that's been brought about by the Healing Church. Not even close. This was just the most recent in a long line of terror-filled nights that needed a hunter to clean up everyone else's mess. And in November of 2015, FromSoft released the Old Hunters DLC and let us discover for ourselves what one of the first atrocities that the Healing Church committed was. FromSoftware make good DLC. I don't think anyone will disagree with this, but hey, if you are that one guy, sound off in the comments and share your point of view with us. Given the turnover time on this one, 8 months or so after the base game release, they probably had it in the pre-production phase before they shipped the game. And there are elements of the story such as Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower and Kos, who are referenced in the base game. These threads didn't need to be in there, but given what the Souls fandom is like for jumping on every little detail and speculating to hell and back on what it might mean, it's great that they were able to expand on these things in the DLC. From what I can gather from digging around online, there were originally 2 planned DLCs for Bloodborne, but these were eventually consolidated into one. This seems to have been as much a pro-gamer move as a business one. Dark Souls 3 had been in pre-production since before the release of 2, so they were probably a good way along with the project and looking to consolidate their workforce onto that and whatever came next. However, Yamagiwa also said that the team felt they could create an overall better experience by shipping their ideas in a single DLC rather than multiple. So gamers only had to pay once, and we got a bigger, louder DLC. FromSoft's DLCs are just as obtuse as any other part of their base game. You don't have to jump through quite as many hoops to access the Bloodborne DLC as you do the Dark Souls one, but you still have to do things that you've been conditioned not to do. Specifically, you have to get grabbed by an amygdala again. I can't say that I don't appreciate this. I'm guessing that this wasn't some big secret, that you could go on the internet on day one and find out exactly when and how you can jump in. But the decision to integrate these things into their game worlds, rather than just have a Start DLC menu option, is one that really suits the game, and I just like the vibe of it. I love the idea of a world where FromSoft release a DLC, and players spend literally months jumping through hoops, making smoke signals, and forming entire cults to figure out how to access the damn thing. Then, one day in the future, long after we've all given up on ever accessing it, some random streamer stumbles into it, and the community spends weeks dissecting their stream and retreading their steps to figure out how the hell they did it. In terms of content, we get some epic new drip in the form of the Old Hunter's outfit, and strength builds get their own version of the threaded cane, while skill builds get a sleek and sexy saw cleaver alternative. Those are by no means the most outrageous weapons we can find here though. Like, one dude literally shows up with a Gatling gun. My bro, how do you have more than 20 quicksilver bullets? Rules for me, but not for thee. My head. The bosses in this one are also on another level. I think the devs cut loose a bit more with the DLC boss fights, because the DLCs are generally meant to be started at a higher level. The players need to have worked just to arrive at the starting line, and therefore should be somewhat conditioned to what the game expects from them. The team also listens to feedback, and takes note of what people like and what they don't in the base game. As such, we get amazing rumbles with legendary hunters like Ludwig. Yes, that scream is traumatizing. Lady Maria, and I have a real love-hate thing with the Orphan of Kos. I think it's a genuinely amazing fight, but I also had to replay it so many goddamn times, and I burnt through hundreds of blood vials in the process, meaning I had to go on a lot of shopping trips. I reached a point where I felt like my time was being seriously disrespected, but I can't deny getting a rush when I finally landed that last blow and sent him back to the ocean. I'm still not sure how I feel about Lawrence though. Honestly, I haven't defeated him yet, and I'm not sure I see any benefit in doing so. But hey, it's nice that he's here. In terms of story, just like with the base game, we arrive at the end in the Hunter's Nightmare. Here we find the spirits of many a blood-drunk hunter who went mad from murder and the old blood, and eventually became trapped in this purgatory to live out an unending cycle of violence and death. This area recycles the Cathedral Ward, but don't go thinking this is lazy. Oh no, this is very calculated. After all, this is the final destination of all Yharnam's hunters, so it makes sense to see familiar sights in it. From here, we are pushing backwards, following a trail of breadcrumbs that leads us to the source of this madness, and slowly piecing together what any of this actually means. The first boss we fight in this place is the church's first hunter, Ludwig, and for his second phase, he busts out the Holy Moonlight Greatsword. Like Patches, there's one of these in most Fromsoftware games. It's just a little fun Easter egg, and not a hint at some kind of greater FromSoft connected universe. They really don't want to make that a thing. After all, none of these fools would stand up to Okami for 5 seconds. Yeah, I said it. And no, I will not be accepting any questions about it at this time. Beyond Ludwig, after a small transitional area, we emerge into a research hall where we see... well, this is disgusting. This is what the Healing Church did to the people of Yharnam. This is what actually created the Celestial Emissary in the base game. Whatever benefit people got from the healing blood, because, let's be real, no doubt some were brought back from the very brink of death by it. There are fathers and mothers who could watch their children grow up because a shot of this stuff saved them from some terminal illness or another. And yet, all of that is the fruit of mountains of suffering, as the people in power pursue their mad dreams of transcendence. It makes you wonder who the real monsters actually are. Much like Walter White, you have to ask yourself, was Lawrence transformed into a hideous monster? Or was he always this thing and just hiding so well in his human skin that for a while, he even convinced himself? After a fight with the Living Failures, another garbage tier boss, we get into the real reason we're here. It's time to enter the Astral Clock Tower and meet Lady Maria. Lady Maria was all over the key art for the DLC, and is considered the quintessential Jane Bloodborne. I was low-key expecting her to be a quest giver at first, and maybe an optional boss depending on how things went down, but when we approach her, she seems very dead. Man, does she ever remind me of the doll. Actually, what was it the doll set said? Bordering on mania. Kinda warm. Like someone was playing dress up in them. I am very uncomfortable right now. When you try to touch Maria though, she has this to say.
A corpse should be left well alone.
Okay, I get it. No means no. There's no need to... Wait. You're not actually a corpse. What did you really mean? Oh my god, fine, let's do this. Going back to some of my earlier boss complaints, I actually defeated Lady Maria on my first try during my first playthrough. I was a little disappointed, as well as relieved, all things considered. I should give myself some credit and say I was probably just in the zone at the time, and really nailing the pistol shot timings, but there was probably some RNG working in my favour. Maybe I just got the same attack repeated frequently, which made reading it easier. Either way, I never had the chance to get good against her, and she made me pay hard for that in my replay. She's a great fight though. I honestly would have preferred more of these hunter-style bosses over the big monster type. But then again, if every DMC boss was Virgil, he'd probably lose his appeal. Maria's clothes tell us this about her. Among the first hunters, all students of German, was the lady hunter Maria. This was her hunter's cap, crafted in Cainhurst. Maria is distantly related to the undead queen, but had a great admiration for German, unaware of his curious mania. Oh. I'm very uncomfortable right now. This brings us all the way to the source of the torment, the fishing hamlet, and the dead great one named Kos. The buildings of the hamlet are all run down, decayed and covered in barnacles. The inhabitants are all mutated and transformed into fish people, and very aggressive. Within an old well in the village, we can find Lady Maria's Rakuyo sword. As if this magnificent weapon was just cast away one day, like the great huntress could no longer stand the sight of it. So what happened here? Well, a massacre happened. Hearing of a natural great one being beached out in the world, the scholars and the hunters came to claim it as their own. They slew all the people of the hamlet, cut open Kos, took her unborn child, and the many parasites inside her, to use in their experiments with the citizens of Yharnam. In an act of vengeance, Kos placed a curse upon the healing church and its hunters. They are doomed to descend into madness, just like Father Gascoigne, and be pulled into this nightmare to live out an eternity of violence and death. Much of this is relayed to us by Simon, a hunter who seems to have been pulled into this madness with his wits still very much intact, and who simply wants it to end so that everyone can finally find their peace. To bring this about, we must descend to the beach where the body of Kos lies, and face off and defeat the orphan, the soul of the murdered child of the Great One, now existing in this hell as its focal point. And what a finale it is. Landing the killing blow once more gives the message, Nightmare slain, and tells us that Kos and her child have finally returned to the endless depths of the sea. Okay, that's one more nightmare resolved. It's finally time for us to wake up. I've got to give credit to Folding Ideas' old video on the Bloodborne endings here. I generally steer clear of watching other people's content on games I'm going to cover, for fear of having other people's words put into my mouth. However, in this case, I feel that he really just helped me articulate what was running around in my head all along. None of us are beyond being influenced though, so it's entirely possible there's more to it than that, but let's move forward. There are 3 possible endings to Bloodborne, and one big revelation hidden within them. Returning to the hunter's dream after defeating the wet nurse, we find the workshop in flames, and are informed by the doll that the dawn is coming and the night is soon to end. Gehrman awaits us now, and it's time to face him. The old hunter asks that we kneel before him, and with his trusty burial blade, he will complete our contract, sever our link to the hunter's dream, and we will awaken on a new morning in the grand city of Yharnam. The hunt, the madness, all of the healing church's terrible secrets, the great ones pulling the strings behind the veil, and the utter insignificance of everything we do, all of that will vanish, as dreams do when we awaken from them. You could argue that this is the happy ending, or as close as we can get to such a thing in a Fromsoftware game. But in this case, is happiness worth the price we pay? In the face of the Great Ones and their designs, we seem utterly helpless, to the point where maybe ignorance is bliss. Wouldn't it be nice to... Well, Gehrman said it the best.
Don't think too hard about all of this. Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good.
But what about justice? The Healing Church has committed countless atrocities and should be held accountable for that. If they aren't, then they have free rein to do it all again. But then again, if you forget it all, you won't care. You won't even know that you should care. You're too small, too finite. Better to just stay in your lane and let the big bad monsters and their puppets do as they will. At least you can wake up and walk away, and any fight you can walk away from is a good fight. But what if we say no? What if we don't want to submit? What if all this knowledge, this insight into how things really work is too precious? What if it's so precious that it's worth gambling our sanity on to keep a hold of? Well then, it's time for Gehrman, the first hunter, to finally join the hunt. Gehrman is another exceptional fight. In him, I see the beginnings of Ishin the Sword Saint in Sekiro. He demands that you bring all the tools and skills that you've been honing for the whole game into the arena. He uses broken rhythm and timing to throw you off, and hits with devastating force. But just like Gwyn, he is vulnerable to parries and visceral attacks, and with careful observation, all his little tricks can be figured out, until he has nothing to surprise you with, and then you can push him further and further into a corner, and administer the killing blow. So now what? Does the dream revive him like it does us? Will this go around and around forever? Or has the old man found the peace he truly craves? Well, it's time to shed some light on that, because with the first hunter finally slain, the real lord of the manor finally reveals themselves. Remember the umbilical cord we found in the workshop? This is the Moon Presence, a great one that was operating in opposition to Murgo and Mensis. This is the source of the power that revives us upon death, and just like all great ones, it wants a surrogate, a replacement for its offspring, and with Yharnam slain, it would seem that we just volunteered ourselves for the gig. We will spend an eternity bound into this place and contracting other hunters to work as cleaners on this thing's behalf. That is, unless we consume the umbilical cords ourselves. After all, why not? These relics seem to be the most coveted and powerful items in the whole twisted religion. The world would be better off if they were gone, and doing so grants us eyes on the inside, and raises us to be this one's equal. It can't bind us, and thus, it will try to destroy us. I suspect the reason this fight is on the easier side is because we just had a really tough boss battle, and so the devs felt we'd earned a reprieve of sorts. I appreciate that we weren't made to fight Yharnam again before facing off against this one anyway. That wouldn't have been any fun at all. Defeating the Presence triggers the third and final ending, where we become an infant Great One. The hunter has achieved the one thing that the Healing Church and the Byrgenwerth scholars want more than anything else. They have transcended all limitations and been reborn as a squid.
Congratulations, Reg. It's a squid.
The good news is we have the safety of the hunter's dream and protection of the doll to watch over us as we mature into whatever we become after this. I can only hope that this new god will be a lot more considerate of the ants it walks among, and takes care where it places its feet. Whether or not the nightmare is truly over now is unknown. But for this night at least, the dawn has finally come.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Well, that was certainly a night to remember. A night soaked in the blood of hundreds, if not thousands. The death toll for the countless creatures we slay ourselves is overshadowed by the tremendous toll of suffering enacted upon Yharnam and its people by the Healing Church, going back to long before we ever arrived to deal with Mensis. There are so many lives subjected to torment and ultimately snuffed out, clinically written off as acceptable losses, sacrifices to the greater good of elevating humanity to the level of the Great Ones. One wonders what mania truly drives people to do this. Is it merely a need for power, or is it something simpler, more primal? A desire to matter to the uncaring universe that birthed us. To scream into the endless void that I am here, and have the void at least glance in our direction and acknowledge that it is so. Maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just fear. Fear of the Great Ones. Fear of being completely at the mercy of godlike powers with incomprehensible minds. Fear of being a puppet that can be manipulated at will without even being aware of it. Who could honestly sleep at night, knowing they were a pawn in a game whose rules they didn't understand, forever second-guessing if their decisions are truly their own, or orchestrated by the hands playing the game? And what if you were being moved onto a square where you would be sacrificed in order to set up a plan many moves in the future that you will never understand. It is quite easy to see how such knowledge might drive one to madness and extreme action, or to try to burn the very knowledge from their minds. Such is the nature of cosmic horror. This is usually the part where I get philosophical with you and try to find a ray of hope in all of this darkness. And I do think it's there somewhat. This is horror after all, and real horror is about forcing us to face the uncomfortable questions that we'd rather ignore. Perhaps, though, hope can be found in the actions of a little man in a chapel, trying to protect the few people who stumble his way, regardless of how dark and desperate the situation seems. Or maybe it's in seeing that no matter how big and overwhelming these horrors are, they can be overcome with persistence and patience. That as long as each time they push you down, you get back up and try again, even their vast cosmic minds can be understood, their tricks learnt, and the tables turned about. Certainly, we've learned not to be like Willem and Lawrence. While curiosity and study are perfectly fine things, hubris, trying to crowbar your way through the gates of the Golden City to the very throne of the Maker, well, that's how you get Darkspawn. Bloodborne released to almost universal praise, receiving rave reviews across the board. It fell short of Game of the Year status because The Witcher 3 cleaned house at the Game Awards that year. I can't say as I disagree there either, but that is a conversation for one day in the future when we finally take on that titan. Bloodborne lives on as many a Souls fan's favourite game, a one-of-a-kind entry that gave people more of what they wanted, but rocked the boat in just the right way to make it new, exciting, and visceral. It showed that the formula could be played with to provide much more of a power fantasy and create a much more proactive experience. And as I said before, we just don't get enough worlds like this to go charging around. Personally, I'm fine with Bloodborne being one of a kind. That doesn't mean I don't want more. I'm just okay with the developers exploring other things. But I sure would like an official Steam port and a 60 FPS version for all of us. It's a great adventure through a dark and terrible night, but one that shows us that no matter how deep the dark may become at times, in the morning, the sun will rise again. Well, hello to all you late stayers. Hopefully, you're all still here because you enjoyed the video, and not because you've been tallying up all the things you want to complain about in the comments. Since this one is over 3 hours again, I'll get straight on with the important announcements. I'm returning to, and most likely, finishing up my exploration of the Dragon Age games in the next video with Inquisition. I've got a lot of information on this one, thanks to Jason Schreier's amazing Blood, Sweat and Pixels book, and Mark Darrah's YouTube channel. For those of you interested in trying to emulate Bloodborne on PC for yourselves, I'll leave some useful links in the description. Obviously, you still need a copy of the game to play it. The emulation team are constantly updating this, and from the time I started my first playthrough up until I finished making this video, the experience has only gotten better. I really recommend you give it a try if you've got the hardware. Next, I'd like to thank my collaborators on this one, Sputnik34, who helped me to organise my thoughts for the script, and read all of the Miyazaki quotes, and the Summer of Mark for also reading quotes for me. You guys are awesome. I'll link their channels down in the description too, and I recommend you check them out. They both make awesome videos about awesome games, and Sputnik34 especially loves his Souls games. Especially Dark Souls 2. I'd like to also thank my first 2 paying patrons over on Patreon, V and Heavy Arms, and Cot AMV, who's joined as a channel member. If you're here because you like what I do and would maybe like to help me reduce my day job working hours so that I can make these a little faster, maybe consider hopping over to one of these places to throw me a tip. Until next time though, stay safe and stay afraid of the old blood.